Brian James stands at the entrance of the grand cavernous hall on the Krenim homeworld, his 5'4" frame dwarfed by the massive architecture. He takes a deep breath, steeling himself for the reception that awaits. As the first human to step into this alien stronghold, he carries the weight of Earth's future on his shoulders. The welcoming ceremony begins. Brian strides forward, his steps echoing in the vast space. Towering Krenim officials line the path, their 9-foot heights casting long shadows. As he approaches the leadership, a wave of snickers and muffled laughter ripples through the crowd. The human delegation behind him shifts uncomfortably, their faces flushing with embarrassment. Brian clenches his jaw, refusing to let the mockery deter him. He reaches the center of the hall, standing before the Krenim High Chancellor. The alien leader's eyes, set high above Brian's head, narrow with barely concealed amusement. Suddenly the laughter dies. A hush falls over the assembly as a new figure enters. Iris, daughter of the High Chancellor, glides into the hall. At 9'2", she's a vision of alien beauty, her presence commanding instant respect. Brian's breath catches in his throat as he turns to face her. Undaunted by the earlier ridicule, Brian steps towards Iris. His confident stride belies his small stature. The High Chancellor's expression darkens, clearly displeased by the human's boldness. Before Brian can reach Iris, the Chancellor's booming voice fills the hall. The future of human Krenim relations, he announces, will be determined by a series of diplomatic challenges. These trials will test whether humans are worthy of our alliance. A murmur of excitement ripples through the Krenim officials. Brian, sensing the pivotal moment, speaks up. "I volunteer to represent humanity in these trials," he declares, his voice steady and strong. Laughter erupts once more, but Brian stands his ground. The High Chancellor's lips curl into a smirk as he nods his acceptance. Iris, intrigued by Brian's courage, steps forward. "I will serve as liaison for our small guest," she says, her eyes locked on Brian. As the ceremony concludes, Brian overhears Krenim officials placing bets on his imminent failure. He ignores them, focusing instead on Iris as she guides him through the alien corridors. Her questions about Earth and human culture come rapid fire, genuine curiosity evident in her voice. Brian answers each query, acutely aware of the growing tension between them. Despite their vast size difference, there's an undeniable spark. As they walk, Brian's mind races. The Krenim, he knows, hold a crucial position in galactic politics. Their advanced technology and influence could determine Earth's standing in the interstellar community. They arrive at Brian's quarters, a room that emphasizes his small stature. The bed towers above him, the desk reaches his chest, and even the chair seems more like a throne. Iris watches as Brian surveys the space, a small smile playing on her lips. As night falls on the Krenim world, Brian sits at the oversized desk, strategizing for the challenges ahead. The furniture around him serves as a constant reminder of the odds he faces, but as he thinks of Iris, of Earth's future, and of the sneering Krenim officials, his resolve hardens. He may be short, but Brian James is ready to stand tall for humanity. Tomorrow the challenges begin, and he's determined to prove that size isn't everything in the vast expanse of the universe. As the first rays of the Krenim sun filtered through the towering windows, Brian awoke with a start. The enormity of the bed only served to emphasize his small stature, but he pushed aside any lingering doubts. Today he would face his first diplomatic challenge. Brian made his way to the vast outdoor arena, his heart pounding in his chest. The stands were filled with Krenim spectators, their imposing forms creating a sea of towering silhouettes. At the starting line, Brian stood alongside his Krenim competitors, feeling like a sapling among redwoods. The protective suit encased his body, its unfamiliar weight a constant reminder of the alien environment. Brian took a deep breath, focusing on the task at hand. The ceremonial object, an intricately carved stone cylinder, sat before each participant. Its weight was significant, even for the Krenim. A horn blared, signaling the start of the race. Brian hefted the cylinder, his muscles straining under its mass. The Krenim athletes surged forward, their long strides quickly putting distance between them and the human. Brian gritted his teeth and pushed on, his shorter legs working overtime to keep pace. The first obstacle loomed ahead, a series of narrow, twisting tunnels. Brian watched as the Krenim athletes struggled to maneuver their large frames through the tight spaces. Seizing his opportunity, he darted forward, his smaller size allowing him to slip through with relative ease. He emerged on the other side, having gained crucial ground. Next came a series of precarious platforms suspended over a chasm. Brian's lower center of gravity proved advantageous as he nimbly hopped from one to the next, while his competitors teetered and swayed. With each obstacle, he closed the gap. But the harsh Krenim environment began to take its toll. The planet's intense heat seeped through his suit, and the high gravity made each step a monumental effort. Brian's lungs burned as he gasped for air, his muscles screaming in protest. From her vantage point in the VIP box, Iris watched Brian struggle with growing concern. Her eyes darted between the human and the environmental control panel nearby. Making a split-second decision, she discreetly adjusted the settings on Brian's suit, providing him with much-needed relief. The cool rush of air and the subtle lightening of gravity's pull gave Brian a second wind. He pressed on, drawing even with the lead Krenim athlete as they approached the final stretch. A series of low-hanging arches spanned the last 100 meters. The Krenim competitors were forced to slow, awkwardly ducking and contorting their bodies to pass underneath. Brian, however, raced forward unimpeded, his height allowing him to run full tilt beneath the obstacles. With a final burst of speed, Brian crossed the finish line, the ceremonial object clutched tightly to his chest. The arena fell silent, the Krenim spectators stunned by the unexpected outcome. The High Chancellor's voice boomed across the stadium, begrudgingly acknowledging Brian's victory. "The human has succeeded in this trial," he announced, his tone infused with displeasure. "But let it be known, this is merely the first of many challenges to come." As Brian caught his breath, he noticed Iris approaching. Her eyes shone with admiration as she offered her congratulations. "That was impressive," she said, her voice low and melodious. "Perhaps there is more to humans than we initially thought." Their interaction was brief but charged with an undeniable energy. As Iris turned to leave, Brian couldn't help but notice the graceful way she moved, so at odds with her imposing size. Returning to his quarters, Brian's mind raced with the implications of his victory. He had gained some respect, but he could feel the eyes of the Krenim elite upon him, calculating and cold. They would not underestimate him again. As night fell, a soft knock at his door roused Brian from his thoughts. He opened it to find Iris standing in the hallway, her tall form filling the doorframe. "I thought you might appreciate some insight into our culture," she said, a small smile playing on her lips, "and perhaps some information about the trials to come." Brian stepped aside, inviting her in. As they settled into conversation, the hours slipped by unnoticed. Their discussion ranged from Krenim history to the intricacies of interstellar diplomacy, each finding in the other a keen mind and kindred spirit. As Iris finally rose to leave, the first light of dawn was beginning to creep across the horizon. Brian watched her go, acutely aware of the growing connection between them. He turned back to his room, mind whirling with new knowledge and strategies for the challenges ahead. The day's victory had been hard won, but Brian knew it was only the beginning. The true test of his skills and the future of human-Krenim relations was yet to come. As the Krenim sun rose once again, Brian found himself facing a new challenge. The physical trial had been grueling, but he knew the true test of his abilities lay ahead. The High Council had convened, and word spread quickly through the alien corridors. The human would now face a trial of the mind. Brian stood before the towering doors of the Grand Council chamber, his heart racing. The room beyond held not just his next challenge, but the future of human-Krenim relations. As he waited, a familiar voice called out behind him. "Brian," Iris said, her melodious tones sending a shiver down his spine. He turned to face her, craning his neck to meet her eyes. "I thought you might appreciate some insight before you enter." She led him to a nearby alcove, away from prying eyes. For the next hour, Iris shared invaluable information about Krenim negotiation tactics and cultural nuances. Brian listened intently, his mind absorbing every detail. As their conversation drew to a close, Brian found himself sharing stories of Earth. Its diverse landscapes, the resilience of its people, and the journey that led him to this moment. Iris leaned in, captivated by his words, her eyes shining with curiosity. "Your world sounds fascinating," she murmured, her hand unconsciously moving closer to his. "So different from ours, yet in many ways, so similar." The air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Brian's breath caught in his throat as Iris's fingers brushed against his. For a moment, the vast difference in their size seemed to vanish, leaving only the connection sparking between them. A loud gong echoed through the corridor, shattering the moment. Iris straightened, composing herself. "That's the signal," she said, her professional demeanor returning. "Good luck, Brian. Remember what I told you." With a nod of gratitude, Brian turned and strode towards the council chamber. The massive doors swung open, revealing a cavernous room filled with Krenim officials. At the center stood a circular table, its surface a holographic display of a contested moon. The High Chancellor's voice boomed across the chamber. "Human, your task is to mediate a dispute between two Krenim factions over resource allocation on this moon. You have 3 hours. Begin." Brian approached the table, acutely aware of the towering Krenim negotiators on either side. They launched into rapid-fire arguments, their words a dizzying array of demands and counteroffers. For a moment, Brian felt overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation. Then he remembered Iris's words. Taking a deep breath, he held up his hand. "Esteemed colleagues," he said, his voice steady, "before we continue, I'd like to propose a different approach." The Krenim negotiators fell silent, exchanging skeptical glances. Brian seized the opportunity, guiding the conversation towards common ground. He asked probing questions, encouraging each faction to articulate their underlying needs rather than their surface demands. As the hours ticked by, Brian's unique perspective began to shine through. He proposed innovative solutions that leveraged Earth's experiences with resource management and conflict resolution. The Krenim negotiators, initially dismissive, found themselves intrigued by the humans' ideas. From her observation post, Iris watched with growing admiration. Brian's intellect and diplomatic finesse were on full display, his small stature forgotten in the face of his commanding presence. She found herself leaning forward, hanging on his every word. As the final minutes approached, Brian brought the two factions together with a compromise that satisfied both sides. The holographic display flickered, showing a new distribution of resources that balanced the needs of each group. A murmur of approval rippled through the chamber. The High Chancellor rose, his expression a mix of surprise and reluctant respect. "The human has succeeded in this trial as well," he announced. "The dispute is perseverance." As the chamber emptied, Iris made her way to Brian's side. "That was remarkable," she said, her eyes shining. "You've shown us a new way of thinking about these old problems." Brian smiled up at her, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. "I couldn't have done it without your help," he replied. Their moment of shared triumph was interrupted by the approach of Commander Steele, the leader of the human delegation. His face was stern as he pulled Brian aside. "Well done, James," he said in a low voice. "But be careful. I've noticed your closeness with the Chancellor's daughter. Remember the delicate nature of our mission here. We can't afford any complications." Brian nodded, but as Steele walked away, his eyes drifted back to Iris. She stood across the room, engaged in conversation with a group of Krenim officials. As if sensing his gaze, she looked up, meeting his eyes with a smile that made his heart race. Later that evening, as Brian prepared for bed, a soft chime announced an incoming message. He activated the holographic display to find an invitation from Iris, asking him to join her for a private tour of the Krenim capital city. Brian hesitated, Commander Steele's warning echoing in his mind. But the promise of learning more about Krenim culture and spending time with Iris was too tempting to resist. He sent back his acceptance, his pulse quickening with anticipation. As he left his quarters, Brian failed to notice the shadowy figure that detached itself from a nearby alcove, following silently in his wake. Zarkon's agent moved with practiced stealth, tracking the human as he made his way through the alien corridors towards his rendezvous with Iris. The Krenim night stretched out before them, filled with possibility and hidden dangers. As Brian stepped out into the cool evening air to meet Iris, he was unaware of the political machinations swirling around him, or the challenges that lay ahead. He only knew that he was about to embark on an adventure that would take him deeper into the heart of Krenim society and closer to the enigmatic alien who had captured his imagination. Attention. As Brian stepped out into the cool evening air, the alien cityscape of the Krenim capital stretched before him. Towering spires of iridescent metal reached toward the stars, their surfaces shimmering with an otherworldly glow. The streets buzzed with activity, hovering vehicles zipping between buildings and Krenim of all sizes going about their nightly routines. Iris stood waiting for him, her tall form a striking silhouette against the city's luminescent backdrop. As Brian approached, he couldn't help but marvel at how her presence seemed to command the very space around her. "Ready for your tour, Ambassador?" Iris asked, a hint of playfulness in her voice. Brian nodded, trying to ignore the flutter in his stomach. "Lead the way." As they set off down the main thoroughfare, Brian found himself constantly craning his neck to take in the sights. Iris pointed out landmarks and explained their significance, her hand occasionally brushing against his arm as she guided him through the throng of Krenim pedestrians. That structure there," Iris said, indicating a spiraling tower that seemed to defy gravity, "is the Hall of Scientific Achievement. It houses some of our most groundbreaking inventions." Brian listened intently, fascinated by the rich history and advanced technology of the Krenim. He was so engrossed in Iris's explanations that he failed to notice the shadowy figures trailing them at a discreet distance. As they turned a corner, the street opened up into a vast public square, teeming with activity. Vibrant holographic displays filled the air, and the sound of unfamiliar music reached their ears. "What's going on here?" Brian asked, his eyes wide with wonder. Iris smiled, her eyes twinkling with excitement. "We've stumbled upon the Festival of Celestial Union. It's a celebration of an ancient Krenim myth about two lovers from different worlds who overcame great odds to be together." The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Brian, and he felt a warmth spread through his chest as he looked up at Iris. She met his gaze, and for a moment, the bustling festival around them seemed to fade away. "Would you like to join in?" Iris asked, her voice soft. Without waiting for an answer, she took his hand and led him into the crowd. They participated in various cultural activities, from a ritual dance that had them moving in synchronized patterns to a game of skill that tested their reflexes and coordination. As the night wore on, Brian found himself drawn closer to Iris. The difference in their size seemed to matter less and less as they shared in the joy of the festival. Their laughter mingled with the sounds of celebration, and more than once Brian caught Iris looking at him with an expression that made his heart race. Eventually, they found themselves in a secluded garden on the outskirts of the square. The sounds of the festival were muted here, replaced by the gentle rustling of alien foliage and the soft glow of bioluminescent plants. Iris turned to face Brian, her expression suddenly serious. "Brian, I've never met anyone like you before. Your courage, your intelligence, your ability to see beyond our differences, it's unlike anything I've encountered." Brian's breath caught in his throat. "Iris, I feel the same way about you. You're extraordinary. But I can't help but worry about the implications of whatever this is between us." Iris stepped closer, her towering form casting a shadow over Brian. "I understand the risks, but I can't deny my feelings any longer. Her words were cut short by a booming voice that shattered the intimate moment. "What is the meaning of this?" Brian and Iris whirled around to see a massive Krenim male striding towards them. His military uniform gleamed in the low light, and his face was contorted with anger. "Grax," Iris said, her voice tight. "What are you doing here?" Grax's eyes narrowed as he looked from Iris to Brian. "I could ask you the same question, Iris. Consorting with this human?" Brian stood his ground, meeting Grax's glare despite the Krenim's intimidating size. "We were simply enjoying the festival, sir." Grax sneered. "Is that so? Well, human, if you think you're worthy of the Chancellor's daughter, perhaps you'd be willing to prove it." "What are you suggesting?" Brian asked, his voice steady. "A duel of honor," Grax declared, his voice ringing with challenge. Tomorrow at dawn, the winner earns the right to court Iris officially. Before Brian could respond, Iris stepped between them. This is ridiculous, Grax. You can't. I accept, Brian interrupted, his eyes locked on Grax. The Crenim's eyebrows rose in surprise, then lowered in a menacing scowl. Very well. Prepare yourself, human. Tomorrow you'll learn the true meaning of cranium honor. As Grax stormed away, Brian turned to find Iris staring at him with a mix of admiration and concern. The weight of his decision settled over him, and he realized that the coming dawn would bring far more than just a duel. It would be a test of everything he had come to the Krenim world to achieve, and everything he had unexpectedly found in Iris. The night air suddenly felt colder as Brian contemplated the challenge that lay ahead. The festival continued in the distance, but its joyous sounds now seemed at odds with the tension that had descended upon them. As Brian and Iris made their way back to the diplomatic quarters, the shadowy figures that had been following them all night melted into the darkness, their mission complete. The stage was set for a confrontation that would have far-reaching consequences for both humans and Krenim alike. The night air seemed to grow heavier as Brian and Iris made their way back to the diplomatic quarters, the weight of the impending duel settling over them. The shadowy figures that had been trailing them melted into the darkness, their mission complete, unaware that their actions would set in motion events that would reshape human-Krenim relations. As the first light of dawn broke over the Krenim capital, Brian stood at the entrance of the dueling arena, his heart pounding in his chest. The circular platform loomed before him, surrounded by tiered seating filled with Krenim spectators, their alien faces a sea of curiosity and anticipation. On a raised platform, the High Chancellor sat, his imposing figure a testament to Krenim authority. Brian's eyes found Iris in a special viewing box. She offered him a small, encouraging smile, but he could see the worry etched on her face. Taking a deep breath, he stepped onto the arena floor, facing the towering form of Grax. The Krenim warrior towered over Brian, his muscles rippling beneath his skin. In each of their hands was a Zartok, a staff-like weapon with energy-emitting ends. Brian tested the weight of the unfamiliar weapon, acutely aware of his size disadvantage. A horn sounded, signaling the start of the duel. Grax moved with unnatural speed, his enhanced abilities courtesy of Zarkon's illegal drugs. He swung his Zartok in a wide arc, the energy crackling as it sliced through the air. Brian ducked, feeling the heat of the weapon pass over his head. Using his smaller size to his advantage, Brian rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding another powerful strike. He scrambled to his feet, his mind racing to formulate a strategy. Grax's enhanced speed and strength were formidable, but Brian noticed a lack of finesse in his movements. As the duel progressed, Brian began to use the arena itself to his advantage. He leapt onto a decorative pillar, using it as a springboard to launch himself over Grax's head. The Krenim crowd gasped as the human displayed agility they had never seen before. Landing behind Grax, Brian struck quickly with his Zartok, landing a glancing blow on the Krenim's leg. Grax roared in anger, his attacks becoming more frenzied. Brian slid between the warrior's legs, confusing and frustrating his opponent. "Stand still, you insignificant creature," Grax bellowed, his voice echoing through the arena. Brian didn't respond, conserving his energy for the fight. He noticed Grax's movements becoming less coordinated, his enhanced abilities taking a toll on his body. Seizing the opportunity, Brian launched a series of quick strikes, each one precisely aimed at Grax's weakening form. Suddenly, Grax's body convulsed violently. He dropped his Zartok, clutching at his chest. The Krenim warrior collapsed to the arena floor, his body racked with spasms. The crowd erupted in chaos as medical personnel rushed onto the platform. "The duel is suspended," the High Chancellor's voice boomed over the commotion. Brian stood frozen, his Zartok still raised, as he watched the medical team work on Grax. From the corner of his eye, he saw a figure attempting to slip away from the arena. It was Zarkon, his face a mask of panic. Before the advisor could make his escape, Krenim's security forces surrounded him. Under the pressure of questioning and the evidence of Grax's condition, Zarkon crumbled, confessing to providing the illegal substances that had enhanced Grax's abilities. The High Chancellor's face darkened with anger as he listened to Zarkon's confession. Rising from his seat, he addressed the stunned crowd. "In light of this deception, I declare this duel null and void," he announced. Turning to Brian, he continued, "Human, I offer my sincerest apologies for this dishonorable act. A full investigation will be conducted into Zarkon's activities." As the words left the Chancellor's mouth, Iris burst from her viewing box, racing across the arena floor. Without hesitation, she threw her arms around Brian, embracing him tightly in front of the entire assembly. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Such a public display of affection between a Krenim and a human was unprecedented. The High Chancellor's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed as he watched his daughter openly defy Krenim's social norms. "Father," Iris said, her voice carrying across the now silent arena, "I cannot deny my feelings any longer. Brian has proven himself worthy not just through this duel, but through his intelligence, courage, and compassion." The High Chancellor's expression softened as he saw the genuine emotion in his daughter's eyes. After a moment of tense silence, he spoke. "Brian of Earth," he said, his voice solemn, "you have indeed proven yourself worthy of Krenim respect. Your actions in both our diplomatic challenges and this unconventional duel have demonstrated your value. I hereby invite you to participate in our high-level diplomatic discussions as a representative of humanity's interests." A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd, though not all faces showed enthusiasm. In the higher tiers of the arena, a group of Krenim officials exchanged dark looks, their disapproval evident. As the arena began to clear, Brian and Iris found a moment alone. They stood at the edge of the platform, looking out over the Krenim capital city, its spires glowing in the morning light. "What happens now?" Brian asked, his hand finding Iris's. Iris squeezed his hand gently. "We've opened a door, Brian, but the path ahead won't be easy. There are those who won't accept this change easily." Brian nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Whatever challenges come, we'll face them together, for us and for the future of human-Krenim relations." As they stood there, contemplating the future they had inadvertently shaped, neither Brian nor Iris noticed the group of Krenim traditionalists gathering in a shadowy alcove of the arena. Their whispered conversations and furtive glances promised that the day's events were far from the end of their story. Struggles. Their whispered conversations and furtive glances promised that the day's events were far from the end of their opposition to the growing human-Krenim alliance. As Brian and Iris turned away from the arena, a Krenim messenger approached them with urgency. "The High Chancellor requests your immediate presence at an emergency session of the High Council," he announced, his voice tinged with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Brian exchanged a quick glance with Iris, noting the surprise in her eyes. "We'll be there right away," he responded, his mind already racing with possibilities. They hurried through the winding corridors of the Krenim governmental complex, the tension in the air palpable. As they entered the Grand Council chamber, Brian was struck by the gravity of the situation. The circular room was filled with Krenim officials, their faces etched with concern. At the center, the High Chancellor stood, his imposing figure commanding attention. "Brian of Earth," the Chancellor addressed him, his voice echoing in the chamber. "Recent events have accelerated the need for closer cooperation between our peoples. As such, I am granting you the status of human representative to this council." A murmur rippled through the assembled Krenim, a mix of approval and dissent. Brian nodded solemnly, acutely aware of the weight of this unprecedented honor. The Chancellor continued, his tone grave. "We face a new crisis. Our deep space monitoring station has detected an unknown alien fleet approaching Krenim space. Their technology and numbers surpass our own, and yours." Holographic displays flickered to life, showing the advancing fleet, a vast armada of ships unlike anything Brian had ever seen. The council erupted into worried discussions, the threat of this unknown force looming large. "I propose," the Chancellor's voice cut through the clamor, "a joint human-Krenim task force to investigate and, if necessary, defend against this threat." Brian stepped forward, seizing the opportunity. "The human contingent stands ready to assist. I volunteer to lead our team in this crucial mission. Iris moved to stand beside him. Father, with your permission, I would like to serve as the Krenim co-leader. My military expertise and familiarity with both our species make me well suited for this role. The Chancellor nodded, a hint of pride in his eyes. Very well. You will depart immediately. The fate of both our peoples may rest on the success of this mission. In the days that followed, Brian and Iris worked tirelessly to prepare for their departure. They coordinated strategies, selected crew members, and familiarized themselves with the advanced Krenim battleship that would serve as their base of operations. During a rare moment of quiet, Brian found Iris on the ship's observation deck, her eyes fixed on the stars beyond. He approached, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. Ready for this? Iris turned, a small smile playing on her lips. As ready as one can be when facing the unknown. She paused, her expression growing serious. Brian, what we're doing, it's more than just a mission. We're shaping the future of our peoples. He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Together, Iris. We'll face whatever's out there together. As the massive Krenim battleship lifted off from the planet's surface, Brian stood on the bridge, watching the world that had become his second home shrink beneath him. The ship's crew, a mix of humans and Krenim, worked in harmony, a testament to the progress they had already made. Their journey took them to the edge of Krenim space, where they encountered the treacherous Vortex Nebula. Swirling clouds of cosmic dust and energy storms created a navigational nightmare. Brian's experience with human space exploration proved invaluable as he suggested unconventional maneuvers to safely traverse the nebula. Adjust our shields to create a slipstream effect, Brian called out, his voice steady despite the ship's violent shaking. It'll allow us to ride the nebula's currents instead of fighting against them. Iris relayed the orders in Krenim, her trust in Brian's judgment evident. The ship's crew worked in perfect synchronization, human and Krenim alike, as they implemented the daring strategy. As they emerged from the other side of the Vortex Nebula, a gasp rippled through the bridge. Before them lay not a hostile alien armada, but a vast and diverse collection of ships, a refugee fleet of epic proportions. Multiple species detected, a Krenim sensor operator reported, his voice filled with awe. They appear to be fleeing something. Brian and Iris exchanged glances, the magnitude of the situation sinking in. This was no longer a potential combat mission, but a humanitarian crisis on a galactic scale. Open a channel, Brian said, his mind already formulating a plan. We need to make contact and offer our assistance. As Iris began the process of establishing communication with the refugee fleet, Brian couldn't help but feel that they stood on the precipice of a new era. The challenges ahead were immense, but so too were the opportunities for forging new alliances and reshaping the galactic landscape. Little did they know that among the sea of desperate refugees, a hidden threat lurked, one that would test not only their newfound alliance, but the very fabric of their civilizations. Civilization. As Brian and Iris coordinated efforts to assist the refugee fleet, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The diversity of species and the sheer scale of the exodus were unprecedented, raising questions about what could have driven so many to flee their homes. During a strategy meeting with the refugee coalition leaders, Brian noticed subtle inconsistencies in their behavior. Some seemed overly agreeable, while others appeared to struggle with basic decision-making. Iris caught his eye, her expression mirroring his concern. Something's not right, Brian whispered to Iris as they stepped away from the main group. Their responses seem manipulated. Iris nodded, her brow furrowed. I've noticed it too. We need to investigate this further, but discreetly. They began a covert operation, closely observing the interactions within the refugee coalition. It didn't take long for a pattern to emerge. The Zarn, a species known for their advanced mental abilities, seemed to be at the center of the unusual behavior. Brian's experience with human neuroscience proved invaluable as they delved deeper into the mystery. Working with the Krenim science team, he adapted Earth's EEG technology to create a device capable of detecting and disrupting psychic influences. As they worked side by side in the ship's laboratory, Brian and Iris found themselves drawn closer together. The intensity of their shared mission and the growing trust between them created a palpable tension. "Hand me that neural calibrator," Brian said, reaching out without looking up from his work. Iris passed him the tool, their fingers brushing momentarily. They both paused, eyes meeting in a moment of unspoken connection. Clearing her throat, Iris quickly turned back to her console. "The Krenim defensive system should be able to amplify the range of your device," she said, her voice slightly strained. "I've been working on integrating them." Brian nodded, grateful for the distraction. "Perfect. With your modifications, we should be able to cover the entire diplomatic section of the ship." As they finalized their countermeasure, Brian and Iris devised a plan to isolate the Zarn representatives under the guise of providing them with special accommodations. This would allow the human Krenim team to work without interference while gathering evidence of the Zarn's manipulative activities. The day of the crucial negotiation session arrived. Brian and Iris exchanged a tense glance as they entered the chamber, the anti-psychic devices hidden and ready. As the talks began, Brian discreetly activated the network. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Several coalition members, including key leaders, suddenly looked disoriented. Their eyes darted around the room in confusion, as if waking from a dream. The Zarn representatives, realizing their abilities had been neutralized, leapt from their seats and made a dash for the exit. Iris was ready, signaling her security team to move in. "Brian, coordinate from the command center," Iris shouted as she sprinted after the fleeing Zarn. Brian raced to the ship's nerve center, bringing up internal sensors to track the pursuit. "Iris, they're heading towards the maintenance shafts on Deck 7, he relayed through the comm system. "I'm sealing off adjacent corridors to funnel them towards the cargo bay." Iris acknowledged, leading her team through the winding passageways of the battleship. The Zarn's agility made them difficult to catch, but Brian's strategic thinking allowed him to predict their movements and guide Iris to cut them off. As they neared the cargo bay, Brian's voice crackled over Iris's communicator. "They're cornered. Be careful. They might be desperate." Iris entered the vast cargo hold, her team fanning out behind her. The Zarn leaders stood at the far end, their backs against a sealed airlock. "It's over," Iris called out, her weapon raised. "Surrender peacefully, and you'll be treated fairly." The lead Zarn hissed, its eyes darting for an escape route. In a blur of motion, it lunged towards a stack of crates, seeking cover. "Iris, watch your left," Brian's voice warned through the comm. Reacting instantly to Brian's advice, Iris ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding a piece of equipment hurled by one of the Zarn. She came up firing, her stun blast catching the alien mid-leap. With practiced efficiency, Iris and her team subdued and secured the Zarn leaders. As the last restraints were applied, she let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "We got them, Brian," she reported, a smile in her voice. "Nice work with the tactical support." Back in the negotiation chamber, Brian and Iris revealed the truth to the stunned coalition leaders. Initial shock and anger gave way to grudging appreciation for the delicate handling of the situation by the human Krenim team. As the implications of the Zarn's actions sank in, a new sense of unity began to form among the diverse species of the refugee coalition. They now saw the value of an alliance with both the Krenim and humans, recognizing the strength that could come from their combined resources and knowledge. The High Chancellor, impressed by the successful resolution of the crisis, formally recognized Brian's contributions. In a ceremony aboard the battleship, he elevated Brian's status within the Krenim diplomatic corps, a move that sent ripples of excitement and concern through the assembled dignitaries. As celebrations began to mark the new alliances being formed, Brian and Iris found a moment alone on the observation deck. The swirling colors of a nearby nebula painted the room in soft, otherworldly hues. "We did it," Brian said softly, turning to face Iris. "I couldn't have done this without you." Iris stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "We make a good team, don't we?" The tension between them, built up over countless shared challenges and quiet moments, finally reached its breaking point. They came together in a passionate embrace, the adrenaline of their recent success mingling with months of unspoken attraction. But their moment was cut short by an urgent beep from the ship's communication system. Reluctantly pulling apart, Iris activated the nearby console, Her face paled as she listened to the incoming message. "Brian," she said, her voice tight with worry, "we have a problem. There's been a coup attempt on the homeworld. My father. He's been taken hostage." Brian's mind raced, quickly grasping the implications. Their success in space had inadvertently destabilized the political situation at home. The fragile alliance they had worked so hard to build was now in jeopardy. "We need to go back," he said, his tone resolute. "Now." As they rushed to the bridge to set a course for the Krenim homeworld, Brian and Iris exchanged a loaded glance. They both knew that the true test of their relationship, and the future of human-Krenim relations, lay ahead. The battle to save the High Chancellor and preserve their hard-won peace was just beginning. The battle to save the High Chancellor and preserve their hard-won peace was just starting. As their ship hurtled through hyperspace toward the Krenim homeworld, Brian and Iris worked feverishly to coordinate their response. The bridge buzzed with activity as crew members relayed updates and prepared for potential confrontation. Suddenly, the main view screen flickered to life, revealing the weathered face of Commander Steele. His expression was grim as he delivered his report. "The situation has escalated beyond our worst fears," Steele said, his voice tight. "General Kraz and his traditionalist faction have seized control of the capital's defense systems. They're holding the High Chancellor and key officials hostage in the central government complex." Brian's mind raced, analyzing the implications. "What about our forces on the ground?" "Scattered and cut off," Steele replied. "We need you here, and fast." As they dropped out of hyperspace, the Krenim homeworld loomed before them. But instead of the welcoming sight they had expected, they found themselves facing an activated planetary defense grid. "They've locked us out," Iris said, frustration evident in her voice. "We can't land." Brian's eyes narrowed as he studied the flickering energy barrier surrounding the planet. "Maybe not through conventional means," he mused, "but I think I see a way in." He turned to the Krenim crew members, outlining his plan. "Your defense systems are impressive, but they're not designed to account for human hacking techniques. If we combine our knowledge, we might be able to create a small window, just enough for a stealth shuttle to slip through." The next hour was a flurry of activity as Brian worked alongside the Krenim technicians. His fingers flew across the alien console, adapting Earth-based algorithms to the Krenim systems. Finally, a cheer went up as a tiny fluctuation appeared in the energy grid. "We've got our opening," Brian announced, "but it won't last long." Iris was already moving towards the hangar bay. "I'll assemble a team. We're going in." Minutes later, Brian found himself strapped into a sleek Krenim shuttle alongside Iris and a handful of loyal soldiers. As they approached the planet's surface, the shuttle's stealth systems engaged, rendering them nearly invisible to sensors. They touched down on the outskirts of the capital city, the looming spires of the government district visible in the distance. Iris led them to a concealed entrance to the underground maintenance tunnels. "These will lead us straight to the complex," she whispered, "but we'll need to move quickly and quietly." As they navigated the cramped passageways, Brian's smaller human frame proved unexpectedly useful. He squeezed through narrow gaps and bypassed security checkpoints designed for the larger Krenim physiology. "I never thought I'd be grateful for being the runt of the litter," Brian quipped as he helped disable another security node. Iris smirked, but her eyes held a hint of admiration. "Your adaptability continues to impress me, Brian." As they neared the surface, the sounds of conflict grew louder. Emerging from a service hatch, they found themselves in the midst of chaos. Loyalist and traditionalist forces exchanged fire across a wide plaza. Brian's training kicked in, and he surprised even himself with his combat effectiveness. Using the terrain and his agility to his advantage, he outmaneuvered larger Krenim soldiers, providing covering fire for Iris and their team. They fought their way to the government complex, but an ambush separated them from the rest of their squad. Brian and Iris found themselves alone, deep in enemy territory. "Looks like it's just us now," Brian said, checking his weapons charge. Iris nodded grimly. "Then we'll have to be enough." They moved through the corridors, relying on each other's strengths to overcome obstacles. Brian's technical skills allowed them to bypass locked doors, while Iris's knowledge of the building's layout kept them oriented. As they approached the central chambers, voices drifted from a nearby room. Brian held up a hand, signaling Iris to stop. They crept closer, listening intently. "Why use the hostages to force our demands?" a gruff voice was saying. "All humans will be expelled from Krenim space, and will reject this foolish refugee coalition." Brian and Iris exchanged alarmed glances. They had stumbled upon General Kraz's secret command center. "We need to stop them," Iris whispered urgently. Brian's mind whirred, formulating a plan. "If we can disable their communications, we might be able to turn this around, but it's risky." Iris met his gaze, trust evident in her eyes. "I'm with you, Brian. What's the plan?" He quickly outlined his strategy, and together they sprang into action. Using a combination of Brian's technical sabotage and Iris's knowledge of Krenim combat tactics, they launched a coordinated attack on the command center. The element of surprise worked in their favor. Before Kraz and his lieutenants could react, Brian had already scrambled their communications and locked down the exits. Iris moved with lethal efficiency, disarming the traditionalists before they could mount an effective defense. In the chaos, Brian found himself face-to-face with General Kraz himself. The towering Krenim sneered down at him, reaching for a concealed weapon. But Brian's human reflexes proved faster. He ducked under Kraz's grasp, using the general's own momentum to flip him onto his back. With Kraz subdued and his inner circle neutralized, Brian and Iris quickly took control of the command center's systems. They broadcast proof of the general's treachery to the Krenim public and military, turning the tide of the conflict. As loyalist forces regained control of the capital, Brian and Iris led a team to rescue the High Chancellor and other hostages. The relief on the Chancellor's face was evident as they escorted him to safety. In the aftermath of the crisis, the capital erupted in celebration. The High Chancellor, addressing a crowd of humans and Krenim alike, formally recognized the value of their alliance. He announced plans for increased cooperation and a renewed commitment to aiding the refugee coalition. Amidst the jubilant atmosphere, Brian and Iris found a moment of relative privacy on a balcony overlooking the city. The adrenaline of their success still coursed through their veins, and the intensity of their shared experience hung in the air between them. "We did it," Brian said softly, turning to face Iris. She stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "We make quite a team, don't we?" The tension between them, built up over countless challenges and quiet moments, finally reached its breaking point. They came together in a passionate kiss, the sounds of celebration fading into the background. But their moment was short-lived. A harsh voice cut through the air, causing them to break apart. "How touching," sneered Zarkon, the former advisor who had once plotted against Brian. He stood at the entrance to the balcony, a stolen energy weapon trained on the couple. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" Brian and Iris tensed, ready for action. The knight's victories suddenly felt hollow as they faced this new personal threat. Zarkon's eyes blazed with hatred as he took a step forward, his finger tightening on the trigger. Trigger. Brian's mind raced, calculating their odds. The balcony offered little cover, and Zarkon's finger trembled on the weapon's firing mechanism. "Inside," Zarkon snarled, gesturing with the energy weapon towards a nearby doorway. "Now." Brian and Iris exchanged a quick glance before complying, their hands raised. Zarkon herded them through the door and into a cramped storage facility, shelves stacked high with data crystals and communication equipment. The space was oppressively small, especially for Iris's Krenim frame. Brian, however, found himself with more room to maneuver, a fact he filed away for later use. "You've ruined everything," Zarkon hissed, his eyes darting between them. Centuries of Krenim tradition, strength, and purity, all threatened by this human infestation. Iris took a cautious step forward, her hand still raised. "Zarkon, think about what you're doing. This goes against everything the Krenim stand for. Where's your sense of honor?" "Honor?" Zarkon spat. "What do you know of honor, Iris? Consorting with this alien? Betraying your own kind?" As Zarkon ranted, Brian's eyes never left the energy weapon. He noticed a subtle pattern, a brief flicker in its power indicator after each aggressive gesture Zarkon made. His mind whirred, recognizing the weapon's recharge cycle. Carefully, Brian caught Iris's eye. Using the subtle hand signals they had developed during their earlier missions, he conveyed his observation. Iris's expression remained neutral, but a slight nod confirmed she understood. "You're right, Zarkon," Iris said, her voice steady. "I have betrayed something. I've betrayed the fear and ignorance that held our people back for too long." As she spoke, Brian tensed, ready to move. Zarkon's attention focused on Iris, his grip on the weapon tightening. "Our alliance with the humans, with the refugee coalition, it's made us stronger, not weaker," Iris continued. "Can't you see that?" Zarkon's face contorted with rage. "Lies! We don't need them. We don't need any—" Brian saw his chance. As Zarkon's arm swung up, Brian dropped and rolled, narrowly avoiding the energy blast that scorched the wall behind him. In the same fluid motion, he slid between Zarkon's legs, throwing the larger Krenim off balance. Iris moved with lightning speed, her longer reach allowing her to grab Zarkon's weapon arm. The two Krenim grappled, their strength evenly matched. Brian scrambled to his feet, looking for an opening to assist. The storage room erupted into chaos. Shelves toppled, sending data crystals scattering across the floor. Brian darted in, using his smaller size to his advantage. He aimed precise strikes at Zarkon's joints, exploiting the vulnerabilities in Krenim physiology he had learned during his time with them. Zarkon roared in frustration, his movements becoming more erratic. In a desperate move, he swung the energy weapon wildly. Iris ducked, the blast missing her by inches and impacting a shelf behind her. The metal glowed red-hot, beginning to melt. Taking advantage of Zarkon's momentary distraction, Iris executed a perfect disarming maneuver. The energy weapon clattered to the floor, sliding across the room. Before Zarkon could react, the door burst open. A squad of Krenim security forces poured in, their own weapons trained on the scene. "Stand down!" the lead officer shouted. Zarkon, realizing he was outnumbered, raised his hands in defeat. As the security team moved to restrain him, he fixed Brian and Iris with a venomous glare. "This isn't over," he snarled as he was led away. "There are others who see the truth. The Krenim will never truly accept your kind, human." Brian and Iris watched as Zarkon was escorted out, his words hanging heavily in the air. They shared a look of concern, both realizing the challenges that lay ahead for their relationship and the fragile alliance they had worked so hard to build. Before they could discuss the implications, a junior officer approached them. "The High Chancellor requests your presence immediately," he said, bowing slightly. "An emergency meeting of the Krenim Council has been called." Straightening their disheveled clothing, Brian and Iris followed the officer through the winding corridors of the government complex. The celebrations from earlier had been replaced by a tense atmosphere, with groups of officials huddled in worried conversation. They entered the Grand Council chamber, where the High Chancellor and other senior Krenim leaders were already assembled. The room fell silent as Brian and Iris took their places at the center of the chamber. The High Chancellor's voice rang out, filled with a mix of gratitude and grit. "Brian, Iris, your actions today have once again demonstrated the strength that comes from our alliance. But Zarkon's betrayal has also exposed the fragility of our newfound unity." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembled council members. "We must take bold action to solidify the bonds between our peoples. I propose a cultural exchange program, one that will see humans and Krenim living and working side by side on specially designed stations orbiting both our worlds." A murmur of surprise rippled through the chamber. Brian's mind raced with the possibilities. He stepped forward, his voice clear and confident. "High Chancellor, members of the Council, I volunteer to be among the first humans to live on the Krenim station. I believe this program could be the key to building lasting understanding between our species." Iris moved to stand beside him, her hand briefly brushing against his. "I too volunteer," she said. "My experience with both cultures could prove valuable in helping bridge any gaps in understanding." The High Chancellor nodded, a smile breaking through his serious demeanor. "Your enthusiasm is commendable. Very well, let it be so. We will begin preparations immediately." As the council erupted into discussion, Brian and Iris shared a private glance. They had faced countless challenges together, but this new adventure promised to test them in ways they had never imagined. Yet as they stood there, surrounded by the buzz of excitement and possibility, they knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Together, they would overcome any obstacle. Months passed as Brian and Iris immersed themselves in their new roles aboard Unity. The orbital station, a gleaming testament to human Krenim cooperation, bustled with activity as scientists and diplomats from both species worked side by side. Brian's quarters were sparse but functional, designed to accommodate his human physiology. As he prepared for another day of cultural exchange sessions, a chime at his door announced Iris's arrival. "Ready for today's adventure?" she asked, her towering Krenim frame filling the doorway. Brian nodded, grabbing his datapad. "Always, though I'm still getting used to the artificial gravity. It feels off somehow." As they made their way through Unity's corridors, Brian couldn't help but notice the curious glances from passing Krenim. His smaller stature continued to be a source of fascination, but he had learned to use it to his advantage, often breaking the ice with self-deprecating humor. Their first stop was a joint engineering briefing. Human and Krenim technicians huddled around holographic displays, discussing power distribution improvements. Brian's quick wit and technical knowledge earned him nods of approval from both species. Midway through the briefing, a tremor shook the station. Murmurs of concern rippled through the room as the artificial gravity fluctuated, sending data pads and tools floating upward. "Everyone stay calm," Brian called out, his voice steady despite the chaos. He pushed off from a nearby console, using the reduced gravity to propel himself toward the main control panel. Iris reacted swiftly, her Krenim strength allowing her to anchor herself and reach for floating crew members. "Brian, what's happening?" she called out. "Gravity system malfunction," he replied, fingers flying over the controls. "I'm trying to stabilize it, but the fluctuations are increasing." Warning klaxons blared as the gravity shifted again, more violently this time. Brian's lighter mass proved advantageous as he navigated the changing fields with relative ease. He accessed the central control systems, his mind racing to identify the source of the malfunction. Meanwhile, Iris coordinated rescue efforts. Her powerful Krenim physique allowed her to move through areas of dangerously high gravity, extracting trapped human crew members. "Engineering team to Sector 7, she barked into her communicator. "We have humans pinned down by extreme gravity. Bring levitation gear." In the control room, Brian worked feverishly alongside human and Krenim engineers. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he bypassed fail-safes and rerouted power. "Got it!" he exclaimed as the gravity finally stabilized. The station's crew collectively exhaled in relief. Hours later, after ensuring all systems were back to normal, Brian and Iris found themselves alone in their shared quarters. The adrenaline of the crisis still coursed through their veins. "You were incredible out there," Iris said, her voice low and filled with admiration. Brian looked up at her, suddenly very aware of their proximity. "We both were. I couldn't have done it without you." The tension between them, built up over months of close quarters and shared challenges, reached its breaking point. They came together in a passionate kiss, differences in size and species forgotten in the heat of the moment. But their intimacy was short-lived. A harsh alarm cut through the air, causing them to spring apart. "Unidentified vessel approaching," a computerized voice announced. "All senior staff report to the command center immediately." Exchanging a look of concern, Brian and Iris rushed to respond. They entered the command center to find it abuzz with activity. Holographic displays showed a sleek, unfamiliar ship rapidly closing in on Unity. "What do we know?" Brian asked, stepping up to the main console. The station's security chief, a grizzled Krenim named Voros, shook his head. "Nothing matches our database. It's not responding to hails and its technology. It's beyond anything we've seen." As they watched, the mysterious vessel accelerated suddenly, crossing the vast distance to Unity in seconds. The station's sensors overloaded, screens flickering with static. A blinding flash of light filled the command center. When it faded, a glowing humanoid figure stood before them. Its form shifted and shimmered, defying easy categorization as human or Krenim. "Greetings, children of the stars," the being's voice resonated in their minds rather than their ears. "I am an emissary of the progenitors, those who seeded life throughout this galaxy eons ago." Stunned silence fell over the room. Brian stepped forward, his diplomatic instincts kicking in. "We welcome you to Unity. I am Brian, representing humanity, and this is Iris of the Krenim people. The emissary's gaze seemed to pierce through them. Your alliance has drawn our attention. It represents a potential turning point in galactic history. But are you truly ready for the next stage of cosmic evolution? Before anyone could respond, the being continued. You will be tested. Unity and all aboard will face trials that will measure not just your technology, but your capacity for cooperation, empathy, and moral reasoning. With those words, the emissary vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. Alarms blared once more as Unity's sensors detected strange energy signatures materializing around the station. Brian and Iris exchanged determined glances. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, representing the best of both their species. As the first of the progenitors' trials took shape, Unity's crew braced themselves for tests that would push them to their very limits. As the first of the progenitors' trials took shape, Unity's crew braced themselves for tests that would push them to their very core. The station shuddered as ethereal energy fields materialized around it, forming intricate glowing patterns that pulsed and shifted in mesmerizing ways. Brian and Iris sprung into action, racing to the command center where holographic displays flickered to life, revealing the full scope of the challenge before them. It's some kind of spatial puzzle, Brian observed, his eyes darting across the screens. Look at how the energy fields are interlocking. Iris nodded, her fingers flying over the control panels. The patterns are constantly changing. We need to find a way to navigate through them before they constrict around the station. As the senior staff gathered to assess the situation, Brian felt a familiar surge of adrenaline. This was exactly the kind of impossible scenario he and Iris had trained for, though the stakes had never been higher. I'm picking up matter reconfiguration signatures, a Krenim scientist called out. The puzzle isn't just energy, it's manipulating physical space around us. Brian's mind raced, analyzing the data streaming across the screens. There, he pointed, identifying a subtle pattern in the shifting fields. The human eye is more sensitive to certain color variations. I think I see a path forming, but it's narrow. Iris leaned in, her larger frame casting a shadow over Brian. You're right, but it's too small for any of our ships to navigate. A moment of shared understanding passed between them. Brian met Iris's gaze, a determined glint in his eye. I'll go. My size might actually be an advantage for once. Before anyone could object, Brian was suiting up in an EVA suit modified for his human physiology. Iris coordinated from the command center, her voice steady in his ear as he stepped into the airlock. Be careful out there, she said, a hint of worry creeping into her tone. The airlock cycled, and Brian found himself floating in the midst of the shimmering energy maze. Up close, the patterns were even more complex, constantly shifting and realigning. He pushed off gently, using precise bursts from his suit's thrusters to maneuver through the tight spaces. 30 degrees to your left, Brian, Iris guided him. There's an opening forming. Brian twisted, spotting the gap just as it began to close. He accelerated, tucking his body to slip through the narrowing passage. The energy field crackled around him, sending static across his suit's systems. Back on Unity, Iris watched Brian's progress with growing concern. The puzzle was constricting faster now, threatening to crush the station. She barked orders to the engineering team, instructing them to reinforce the shields and prepare for impact. As Brian navigated deeper into the puzzle's core, he spotted a pulsing note of energy. Iris, I think I've found some kind of control center. I'm going to try to interface with it. Be careful, Iris cautioned. We don't know how it will react to... Her words were cut off as Brian made contact with the node. A surge of energy coursed through his suit, momentarily overloading its systems. For a heart-stopping moment, his comms went dead. In the command center, Iris fought to keep her composure. Brian, do you copy? The seconds stretched into an eternity before his voice crackled back to life. I'm here. The node? It's responding to my input. I think I can stabilize the puzzle's movement. As Brian worked to decipher the alien interface, Iris had a flash of inspiration. Engineering team, realign our shield harmonics to match the puzzle's energy frequency. We might be able to create a resonance effect. The station hummed as the shield shifted, synchronizing with the pulsing energy fields outside. Brian felt the change immediately, the space around him becoming more malleable. "It's working," he exclaimed. "The puzzle is starting to unravel." With a final push, Brian activated a sequence in the control node. The energy fields surrounding Unity began to dissipate, revealing a hidden message etched in light. "First trial completed. Teamwork and adaptability demonstrated. Prepare for greater challenges ahead." As the message faded, a power surge ripped through Unity, overloading systems across the station. Alarms blared as the life support systems faltered, causing the temperature to rise rapidly. Brian rushed back to the airlock, shedding his EVA suit as soon as he was safely inside. He and Iris immediately took charge, dividing the crew into teams to address the crisis. "We need to reroute power from non-essential systems," Iris ordered, her fingers flying over the control panels. "Focus on stabilizing the core systems first." Brian nodded, already moving towards the most affected areas. "I'll coordinate cooling efforts. We can use some techniques from Earth's old space stations to buy us some time." As they worked feverishly to save Unity, the temperature continued to climb. Brian found himself trapped with Iris in a section where the heat had become unbearable. They were forced to remove layers of protective gear, their bodies glistening with sweat as they struggled to repair the damaged systems. Despite the dire circumstances, Brian couldn't help but notice the way Iris's skin shimmered in the emergency lighting. He shook his head, trying to focus on the task at hand. "Brian, look," Iris said suddenly, her voice tight with concern. "Your body temperature is rising faster than mine." He blinked, realizing she was right. "Could be a difference in our species' heat tolerance," he mused, his scientific curiosity momentarily overriding the danger. Iris's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "That's it. We can use this to our advantage. The Krenim can handle the hottest areas while the humans focus on the systems that require more precision in cooler zones." With renewed energy, they implemented their plan. Brian coordinated the human teams, using their ingenuity to improvise cooling solutions, while Iris directed the Krenim to tackle the most critical, heat-affected systems. Slowly but surely, the station's temperature began to stabilize. As the crisis abated, Brian and Iris found themselves alone in the now cooler control room, exhausted but triumphant. Before they could catch their breath, a familiar glow announced the arrival of the progenitor emissary. The being regarded them with what seemed like approval. "You have performed admirably," the emissary's voice resonated in their minds. "Though the temperature crisis was not part of our design trials, your response has been illuminating." Brian and Iris exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. The emissary continued, its form shimmering. "Prepare yourselves. The next trial will test the very foundations of your alliance, challenging you to overcome the deepest biological and cultural divides between your species." With those ominous words, the being vanished, leaving Brian and Iris alone once more. They retreated to their shared quarters, the need for rest overwhelming any lingering tension between them. As they tended to each other's heat-induced injuries, a comfortable silence fell between them. But before they could fully relax, a new alarm shattered the peace. "Unidentified fleet approaching," the station's AI announced. "Multiple species detected, including unknown configurations." Brian and Iris locked eyes, their exhaustion forgotten as they prepared to face this new challenge. The trials, it seemed, were only the beginning. The trials, it seemed, were only the start of their challenges. Brian and Iris exchanged a knowing glance before rushing to the command center. The holographic displays flickered to life, revealing a startling sight: a diverse fleet of ships approaching Unity Station. Some were familiar, others entirely alien in design. "Identify all known vessels," Brian ordered, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. The station's AI responded promptly. "Several ships match Zarn configurations, sir. Others remain unidentified." Iris's eyes narrowed at the mention of the Zarn. "We should activate the anti-psychic defenses," she suggested, recalling their previous encounter with the manipulative species. As if on cue, Commander Steele and Voros entered the command center, their faces grim with persistence. The four of them huddled around the central console, formulating a strategy. We need to initiate first contact protocols, Brian said, but maintain our defensive posture. Voros nodded in agreement. I'll have our security teams on high alert. A notification chimed, drawing their attention back to the main screen. Incoming transmission from the lead ship, the AI announced. With a shared nod of readiness, Brian opened the channel. A holographic figure materialized before them. Tall, ethereal, with skin that seemed to glow from within. The being's voice resonated with a musical quality as it spoke. Greetings, Unity Station. I am Ambassador Zelana of the Etheri. We come seeking peaceful dialogue and cultural exchange. Brian stepped forward, his diplomatic training kicking in. Welcome, Ambassador Zelana. I am Brian, representing the human contingent of Unity Station. We are open to dialogue but must prioritize the safety of our people. Zelana's luminescent features shifted in what might have been a smile. Of course, we request permission to dock a small delegation at your station to further our discussions. After a brief, whispered conference with the others, Brian replied, We agree to receive a limited delegation. Please stand by for docking instructions. As the transmission ended, Brian turned to find Iris looking uncharacteristically nervous. She pulled him aside, her voice low. Brian, I've heard rumors about the Etheri. Their physiology is said to be overwhelmingly attractive to many species. Brian squeezed her hand reassuringly. We're professionals, Iris. We can handle this. The docking bay buzzed with anticipation as the Etheri shuttle arrived. Ambassador Zelana glided down the ramp, followed by a small entourage. Brian found himself momentarily stunned by their graceful movements and otherworldly beauty, but quickly refocused on the task at hand. Ambassador, he greeted, welcome to Unity Station. As they escorted the delegation to the conference room, Brian noticed several Krenim officers, including Voros, seemed transfixed by the Etheri. Iris, however, remained stoic, her attention fixed firmly on Brian. During the initial meeting, Zelana revealed the true purpose of their visit. We represent a coalition seeking to establish a galactic federation. Your human Krenim alliance has caught our attention as a potential cornerstone of this new interstellar community. The implications of this statement hung heavy in the air. Before Brian or Iris could respond, Zelana continued, We invite representatives from Unity to our flagship for further discussions. Brian and Iris volunteered without hesitation, though the weight of responsibility settled on their shoulders. As they prepared to depart, a familiar glow announced the arrival of the progenitor emissary. This encounter will serve as your next trial, the being's voice echoed in their minds. The choices you make will ripple across the galaxy. Choose wisely. With those cryptic words, the emissary vanished, leaving Brian and Iris to contemplate the gravity of their mission as they boarded the shuttle to the Etheri flagship. Upon arrival, they were swiftly separated from the rest of the Unity delegation and led to a private chamber. Inside, they found not only Ambassador Zelana, but also representatives from the Zarn and other alien species. Zelana's voice took on a more serious tone. We have been observing your relationship closely. It represents a model for interspecies cooperation that could change the face of galactic politics. Brian and Iris exchanged a confused glance as Zelana continued. We propose a bonding ritual that would symbiotically link your minds and bodies. This connection would serve as living proof of the potential for deep interspecies relationships. The room fell silent as the implications of this proposal sank in. Before either could respond, they were ushered into a smaller private room to discuss the matter. As the door closed behind them, Brian and Iris found themselves in close proximity, the alien quarters considerably more cramped than those on Unity. The stress of the situation, combined with their deepening feelings for each other, created a palpable tension in the air. Iris, Brian began, his voice husky, this is a lot to process. The implications for galactic peace are enormous, but the personal risk... Iris stepped closer, her large frame dwarfing Brian's. I know, but think of what we could accomplish, the alliance we could forge. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the weight of the galaxy seemed to fade away. Brian reached up, his hand gently caressing Iris's face. Their lips met in a passionate kiss, years of tension finally giving way to raw emotion. Just as things began to intensify, an urgent beep from Brian's communicator shattered the moment. Commander Steele's voice crackled through. Brian, Iris, we have a situation. Long-range sensors have detected a massive energy buildup in a nearby star system. It's artificial and potentially catastrophic. We need you back here now. Reality came crashing back. Brian and Iris quickly composed themselves, the taste of unfinished business lingering between them. As they rushed to rejoin the others, the gravity of their situation became clear. They had to make a decision about the bonding ritual quickly, with the added pressure of an impending cosmic threat looming over them. Standing before the assembled alien coalition, Brian and Iris clasped hands, ready to announce their choice. The fate of their relationship, their alliance, and potentially the entire galaxy hung in the balance. As they opened their mouths to speak, the room fell into an anticipatory hush, all eyes fixed on the unlikely pair, who now stood at the crossroads of history. Galactic history. Brian took a deep breath, squeezing Iris's hand gently. Ambassador Zelana, we are honored by your proposal, Brian began, his voice steady. However, given the urgent situation unfolding in our sector, we must respectfully postpone any decision regarding the bonding ritual. Iris nodded in agreement. Our immediate priority must be addressing the potential catastrophe detected by our long-range sensors. We request the Coalition's assistance in this matter. Zelana's luminescent features dimmed slightly, but understanding shone in their eyes. Of course, the safety of the sector takes precedence. How may we aid you in this endeavor? Before Brian could respond, the room filled with the familiar glow of the progenitor emissary. Its presence sent a ripple of surprise through the assembled alien representatives. The threat you face is of our making? The emissary's voice resonated in their minds. A star-lifting mechanism, created eons ago, has malfunctioned. It now threatens to destabilize the star and potentially trigger a supernova. Brian and Iris exchanged alarmed glances as the emissary continued. Neutralizing this threat will serve as your next trial. You must lead a joint mission to deactivate the device before catastrophe strikes. The room erupted into a flurry of activity as the implications sank in. Brian and Iris quickly excused themselves, rushing back to Unity Station with a sense of urgency that overshadowed their earlier intimate moment. Upon their return, they found Commander Steele and Voris already assembled in the command center. The holographic displays showed a massive structure orbiting a nearby star, pulsing with ominous energy. What are we looking at? Brian asked, studying the readouts. Commander Steele's face was grim. According to our scans, it's an enormous artificial structure, drawing energy from the star at an alarming rate. Its size and complexity suggest progenitor origin. Iris leaned in, her eyes narrowing as she analyzed the data. The energy signature is unlike anything I've seen before. We'll need to modify our shield technology to withstand that level of radiation. Brian nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. We'll need to adapt our deep space survival gear as well. The conditions near that device will be extreme. As they discussed strategy, representatives from the alien coalition arrived, led by Ambassador Zelana. The Ethere's graceful presence seemed to calm the frantic atmosphere of the command center. We offer the use of our most advanced starship, Zelana announced. It is capable of withstanding the intense conditions near the malfunctioning device. Gratitude washed over Brian's face. Thank you, Ambassador. Your assistance could make all the difference. The next few hours were a whirlwind of preparation. Brian worked tirelessly with human engineers, adapting their survival gear for the mission. Across the station, Iris coordinated with Krenim scientists, pushing the limits of their shield technology. As they assembled for the mission briefing, tension crackled in the air. A Krenim officer, his scaled skin glistening under the harsh lights, spoke up. With all due respect, is the human truly fit for this mission? The physical stress could be too much for his smaller stature. Before Brian could respond, Iris stepped forward, her towering form radiating authority. Brian has proven himself time and again. His problem-solving skills and adaptability are unmatched. Size is not a measure of capability. Her impassioned defense silenced the doubters and sent a warmth spreading through Brian's chest. Their eyes met across the room, an unspoken connection flowing between them. As the briefing concluded and the team prepared to board the Aetheri ship, Brian and Iris found themselves alone in a quiet corridor. The weight of the mission pressed down on them, the uncertainty of what lay ahead hanging heavy in the air. Without a word, they moved towards each other. Brian reached up, his hand cupping Iris's face as she bent down to meet him. Their lips met in a kiss that was both tender and fierce, conveying all the words left unspoken between them. When they finally parted, Brian's voice was husky with emotion. "We're going to make it through this, Iris. Together." Iris nodded, her large eyes shimmering with commitment. "Together," she echoed. As they boarded the Aetheri ship, the gravity of their mission settled over the assembled team. Human and Krenim crew members worked side by side, preparing for the challenges that lay ahead. The ship hummed to life, its advanced systems unlike anything they had encountered before. Brian took his place at the command station, Iris standing tall beside him. As the ship detached from Unity Station and set course for the malfunctioning progenitor device, Brian couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and dread. The fate of the sector rested on their shoulders, and the true test of their alliance was about to begin. The Aetheri ship accelerated smoothly, cutting through the void of space with unnatural grace. As they approached the star system housing the progenitor device, the ship's sensors began to light up with warnings. "Energy fluctuations detected," reported the Aetheri navigator, her voice melodious even in its urgency. "The device's instability is increasing exponentially." Brian leaned forward, studying the readouts. "We need to move faster. Can this ship handle more speed?" Zelana nodded, their luminescent form pulsing with concentration. "Initiating emergency protocols. Brace yourselves." The ship lurched forward, its speed nearly doubling. The star grew rapidly in their view screen, its angry red surface roiling with solar flares. And there, silhouetted against the stellar inferno, loomed the massive form of the progenitor star-lifting mechanism. As they drew closer, the true scale of the device became apparent. It dwarfed their ship, its intricate structures pulsing with terrifying energy. Arcs of plasma leapt from the star's surface, drawn in by the device's immense gravitational pull. "By the ancestors," Iris breathed, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and horror. Brian gripped the edge of his console, his fist clenched. "Steady as she goes. We need to find a way to approach without being torn apart." The ship bucked and shuddered as it entered the turbulent zone surrounding the device. Alarms blared as the Aetheri vessel struggled against the intense gravitational forces and energy discharges. Brian's mind raced, drawing on every scrap of knowledge from his years of space exploration. "We need to use the device's own energy field to our advantage," he said, his voice tight with concentration. "If we time our approach just right, we can ride the waves of discharged energy to get closer." The Aetheri pilot looked skeptical, but Zelana nodded in approval. "An unconventional approach, but it may be our only option. Proceed, Brian." With a series of rapid-fire commands, Brian guided the ship through a complex series of maneuvers. They dove and weaved through the maelstrom of energy, using the device's own discharges to propel them forward. After several heart-stopping minutes, they found themselves in a relatively stable position near the progenitor structure. A collective sigh of relief went through the bridge. Iris, who had been intently studying the device's energy readings, spoke up. "I think I've identified a potential access point. It's on the far side of the structure, facing the star." Brian nodded grimly. "Then that's where we need to go. Prepare for EVA. We're going for a spacewalk." "Spacewalk like no other?" "Iris, we're going in." The airlock hissed open, exposing them to the vacuum of space. Brian and Iris pushed off, their tethers trailing behind them as they navigated the treacherous expanse between the ship and the massive progenitor device. The star's angry red glow bathed everything in an eerie light, casting long shadows across the intricate structure before them. As they approached the access point, Brian felt the full weight of their mission pressing down on him. The heat from the nearby star was intense, even through his protective suit. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he focused on the task at hand. We're nearing the entry point, Iris's voice crackled through the comm. Prepare for landing. With practiced precision, they engaged their magnetic boots, touching down on the device's surface. The vibrations from the malfunctioning mechanism reverberated through their bodies, a constant reminder of the ticking clock they faced. Brian's fingers flew over the access panel, his smaller size allowing him to maneuver in the tight space. I'm in. Initiating shutdown sequence now. As the system began to power down, a series of alarms blared to life. Red warning lights flashed across the structure's surface, casting an ominous glow. Brian, we have a problem, Iris called out, her voice tense. The device's fail-safes have activated. We need to perform a manual override. Brian's mind raced, quickly assessing their options. The override points must be scattered across the structure. We'll have to split up to reach them in time. Without hesitation, they divided the override locations between them. Brian took the areas requiring navigation through narrow conduits and crevices, while Iris focused on the sections needing brute force to access. As Brian squeezed through a tight passage, he felt the heat intensify. The star's instability was growing, causing violent energy surges throughout the structure. A bright flash caught his eye, and he instinctively ducked. A plasma discharge sizzled past, missing him by inches. Close call, he muttered, his heart pounding. Iris, how are you holding up? Struggling with these gravitational fluctuations, she responded, her breath labored. But I'm making progress. 2 more override points to go. Brian pressed on, his smaller frame allowing him to slip through gaps in the superstructure that would have been impassable for others. He reached his final override point, fingers flying over the controls as he input the deactivation codes. Last one done, he announced. Iris? Inputting now, she replied. A moment later, her voice rang out triumphantly. Override complete. The massive device shuddered, its energy siphoning process grinding to a halt. For a brief moment, Brian allowed himself to feel a flicker of relief, but the respite was short-lived. A low rumble began to build, quickly growing in intensity. The abrupt cessation of energy transfer had triggered an unexpected chain reaction. Massive sections of the structure began to break apart, drifting into space. Iris, Brian called out, panic rising in his voice. We need to get out of here now. But as he tried to retrace his steps, he realized with horror that his path was blocked by shifting debris. They were trapped on opposite sides of the disintegrating device. The comm crackled to life, Ambassador Zalana's voice filled with urgency. Brian, Iris, the Aetheri ship systems are compromised. We can't get close enough for immediate extraction. Brian's mind raced, searching for a solution. His eyes darted across the chaos surrounding him, and suddenly he saw it. A series of interconnected fragments forming a precarious path towards Iris's position. Iris, I see a way to reach you, he said, steeling himself for what came next. I'm going to have to jump for it. Brian, no, it's too dangerous, Iris protested, but Brian was already in motion. He leapt from one piece of debris to another, his small size and agility allowing him to navigate the treacherous path. Each jump sent his heart into his throat, the void of space yawning beneath him with each step. Iris, watching his approach with a mixture of awe and terror, secured her position amidst the floating wreckage. She extended her suit's tether, creating a lifeline for Brian to grab onto. As Brian neared her position, a massive section of the device broke free, hurtling towards them. Time seemed to slow as Brian made his final leap, soaring through the vacuum towards Iris's outstretched arms. Their hands connected, Iris's powerful grip securing him just as the tractor beam from the Aetheri ship locked onto them. They were yanked away mere seconds before the debris would have crushed them, pulled to safety in a dizzying rush of motion. As they were brought aboard the Aetheri vessel, the full extent of their ordeal became apparent. Their suits were battered, Brian's showing signs of microfractures from the intense stress. The ship's medical team rushed to treat them, their bodies battered and exposed to dangerous levels of radiation. In the aftermath of the crisis, the progenitor emissary appeared on the ship, its presence filling the room with an otherworldly glow. It spoke directly into their minds, commending them for their success while warning of unforeseen consequences. Your actions have altered the balance of power in this sector, the emissary intoned. The energy released has created a temporary wormhole, connecting us to an unexplored region of the galaxy. This presents both opportunity and danger. As the Aetheri ship began its journey back to Unity Station, Brian and Iris found themselves side by side in the medical bay. The intensity of their shared experience hung between them, unspoken but palpable. Their hands intertwined, a gesture that spoke volumes in the quiet of the recovery room. Ambassador Zelana approached, her luminescent form pulsing with a gentle light. "Your connection is remarkable," she observed. "I have a proposal that may interest you both." Brian and Iris exchanged a glance. Curiosity piqued despite their exhaustion. As Zelana began to explain the modified Aetheri bonding ritual, they listened intently. The potential implications of such a connection, both thrilling and terrifying. As Unity Station appeared on the interface, signaling their imminent return, Brian and Iris knew they faced a crossroads. The consequences of their actions, the reactions of their respective species, and the looming threat of the wormhole all lay ahead. But for now, in this moment of calm before the storm, they took comfort in each other's presence, ready to face whatever challenges the future might hold. Bring whatever challenges the future might hold. The Aetheri ship docked smoothly with Unity Station, its sleek form a stark contrast to the bustling activity that greeted them. As the airlock cycled open, Brian and Iris were immediately whisked away by a medical team, their battered bodies requiring urgent attention. In the sterile confines of the medical bay, Brian winced as a doctor examined the microfractures in his suit. Beside him, Iris lay still as a medical scanner hummed over her body, assessing the extent of her radiation exposure. "You two are lucky to be alive," the chief medical officer remarked, shaking his head in disbelief. "Another few minutes out there, and we'd be having a very different conversation." As the medical staff worked tirelessly to treat their injuries, Brian reached out, his hand finding Iris's. The simple gesture spoke volumes, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forged in the crucible of their shared ordeal. Their moment of quiet connection was interrupted by the arrival of Commander Steele and the Krenim High Chancellor. The two leaders strode into the medical bay, their faces a mix of concern and admiration. "Brian, Iris," Commander Steele began, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "What you've accomplished out there, it's nothing short of miraculous." The Krenim High Chancellor nodded in agreement, her metallic scales glinting under the harsh medical bay lights. "Your actions have not only saved countless lives but have also demonstrated the true potential of our alliance." As the leaders expressed their gratitude, Brian's mind drifted back to Ambassador Zelana's proposal. He glanced at Iris, noting the thoughtful expression on her face. It was clear she was considering the same thing. In the days that followed, as they recovered from their injuries, Brian and Iris found themselves at the center of attention on Unity Station. Crew members from all species stopped them in the corridors, offering words of thanks and admiration. But amidst the newfound recognition, they found themselves increasingly drawn to the idea of the Aetheri bonding ritual. One evening, as they sat in the station's observation lounge watching the stars drift by, Brian broached the subject. "Iris, I can't stop thinking about Zelana's offer. The idea of being connected to you on such a deep level, it's terrifying and exhilarating all at once." Iris turned to him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "I feel the same way. We've already been through so much together. This could make us an even more effective team." After careful deliberation, they made their decision. The news spread quickly through Unity Station, eliciting a range of reactions from excitement to apprehension. Ambassador Zelana oversaw the preparations personally, transforming a section of the station into a chamber suitable for the ritual. As Brian and Iris entered the room, they were struck by the otherworldly atmosphere. Bioluminescent fluid filled a large, transparent tank at the center, pulsing with an ethereal light. "Are you ready?" Zelana asked, her form shimmering with anticipation. Brian and Iris exchanged a look, then nodded in unison. They stepped into the tank, the cool fluid enveloping them. As they submerged, Zelana activated the Aetheri technology, and the world around them faded away. Sensations flooded their minds. Flashes of memory, bursts of emotion, fragments of thought. Brian felt Iris's strength and dedication wash over him, while she experienced his quick wit and adaptability. Their consciousnesses intertwined, forming a connection that transcended physical boundaries. When they emerged from the tank, gasping and disoriented, the world seemed different. Brian blinked, trying to focus, and suddenly felt a wave of concern that wasn't his own. "Brian, are you all right?" Iris's voice rang out, but her lips hadn't moved. He stared at her in amazement. "Did you just—" She nodded, a mix of awe and excitement on her face. "I think I did. This is incredible." As they adjusted to their new bond, the implications of their enhanced connection became clear. They found themselves finishing each other's sentences, anticipating each other's needs, and communicating complex ideas with mere glances. Their newfound abilities didn't go unnoticed. A delegation from the Zarn arrived on Unity Station, their interest piqued by reports of the successful bonding ritual. Brian felt a chill run down his spine as he watched the Zarn representatives, their multifaceted eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. "We must study this phenomenon," the lead Zarn researcher insisted, addressing Commander Steele. "The potential applications for interspecies communication are immense." As discussions about the Zarn's request unfolded, Brian and Iris found themselves increasingly involved in station operations. Their unique perspective, combining human intuition and Krenim analytical skills, proved invaluable in navigating the complex political landscape of Unity Station. Their prominence, however, came with its own set of challenges. One evening, as Brian made his way through a rarely used maintenance tunnel, a shortcut he often took advantage of due to his small size, he overheard hushed voices speaking in Krenim. Pressing himself against the wall, he listened intently, his eyes widening as he realized he was witnessing the planning of a sabotage attempt. Without hesitation, he reached out to Iris through their mental link, relaying what he had discovered. In a flurry of coordinated action, Brian used his knowledge of the station's layout to outmaneuver the saboteurs, while Iris leveraged her combat training to apprehend them. The foiled attempt sent shockwaves through Unity Station, leading to increased security measures and a thorough investigation. As the station grappled with these internal threats, a new danger loomed on the horizon. Long-range sensors detected a massive energy signature emerging from the wormhole, heralding the approach of an enormous fleet. The progenitor emissary materialized in the command center, its presence sending a ripple of unease through the assembled crew. "The time of reckoning has come," it intoned, its voice resonating in their minds. "Those who approach seek not cooperation, but dominion." As the emissary explained the nature of the threat, a faction of progenitors intent on subjugating younger races, Brian and Iris found themselves at the center of Unity Station's defense preparations. Their enhanced connection allowed them to coordinate efforts across multiple species with unprecedented efficiency. Amidst the frantic activity, they managed to find a moment alone. As they stood in a quiet corridor, the weight of their responsibilities pressing down on them, Brian reached out and took Iris's hand. "Whatever happens," he said softly, "I'm glad we're facing it together." Iris smiled, her eyes conveying a depth of emotion that words couldn't capture. She leaned in, their lips meeting in a kiss that was both tender and passionate. Their physical connection, now enhanced by their mental link, created a moment of intense intimacy. The blaring of the station's alert system shattered their brief respite. The hostile progenitor fleet had arrived. Hand in hand, Brian and Iris raced towards the command center, their minds already working in tandem to formulate strategies. As they burst through the doors, the scene before them was one of controlled chaos. Crew members from every species represented on Unity Station, working together to face the looming threat. Commander Steele turned to them, his face grave. "We're counting on you two," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Show us what that bond of yours can do." Brian and Iris shared a determined look, their enhanced connection humming with shared purpose. As the first wave of the progenitor fleet appeared on the main view screen, they stepped forward, ready to put their unique abilities to the ultimate test. As the first wave of the progenitor fleet appeared on the main view screen, Brian and Iris stepped forward, their enhanced connection humming with shared purpose. The command center erupted into a flurry of activity as they began coordinating the defense efforts. Initiate defensive protocols, Brian called out, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. Iris, link up with the Krenim tactical team. We need their energy weapon systems online and ready. Iris nodded, her mind already reaching out through their bond to convey complex instructions to the Krenim crew. The station's diverse inhabitants rallied together, each species contributing their unique strengths to the collective defense. Ambassador Zelana glided forward, her bioluminescent form pulsing with urgency. We may have a solution, she announced. The Aetheri possess advanced cloaking technology. With some modifications, we could shield Unity Station from the initial assault. Brian's eyes lit up, his mind racing with possibilities. He turned to Iris, their shared consciousness already formulating a plan. If we can integrate the Aetheri tech with the station's power grid, we could create a large-scale cloaking field, Iris finished, her fingers flying over a nearby console. But we'll need to reconfigure the energy distribution network. As they worked feverishly to implement the plan, Brian and Iris found themselves in close proximity, their physical nearness mirroring their mental connection. The air between them crackled with intensity, their bond growing stronger under the pressure of the crisis. With mere minutes to spare, the adapted Aetheri cloaking technology came online. The hostile progenitor fleet launched its first barrage of energy weapons, only to have them harmlessly deflect off the newly established cloaking field. A cheer went up in the command center, but Brian and Iris remained focused. Through their link, they sensed the immense strain on the station's systems. The power grid fluctuated dangerously, threatening to overload the cloaking field. We need to stabilize the power junctions, Brian realized aloud. Without hesitation, he made for the nearest maintenance shaft. I can navigate the conduits. Iris, guide me. As Brian crawled through the cramped tunnels, Iris's voice echoed in his mind, directing him to critical power nodes. His small size proved invaluable as he manually adjusted and stabilized key junctions, preventing a catastrophic failure of the defensive systems. Meanwhile, Iris coordinated with the military personnel, her Krenim tactical knowledge blending seamlessly with human strategic thinking. Prepare a counterattack, she ordered. Combine Krenim energy weapons with human tactical missiles. We'll strike as soon as there's a gap in their defenses. The Zarn delegation, observing the unfolding battle, approached Iris. We offer our assistance, the lead Zarn researcher stated. Our psychic abilities could disorient the progenitor fleet's crew. Iris's eyes widened as an idea formed, fueled by her shared experiences with Brian. We can amplify your psychic attack, she explained rapidly. Using modified versions of our anti-psychic technology, we can create a feedback loop that will magnify your abilities. As the plan came together, Brian emerged from the maintenance shafts, his face streaked with sweat and grime. He locked eyes with Iris across the command center, their bond pulsing with shared triumph and anticipation. The moment arrived. Unity Station dropped its cloak, unleashing a barrage of Krenim energy beams and human missiles. Simultaneously, the Zarn unleashed their amplified psychic assault. The combined attack caught the progenitor fleet off guard, sowing chaos among their ranks. Now, Brian shouted, launch the fighters. A mixed squadron of human and Krenim pilots shot out from Unity Station's hangars, their craft enhanced with Aetheri technology. Guided by Brian and Iris's strategic analysis, they targeted weak points in the progenitor ship's defenses. The battle raged furiously, Unity Station's forces pressing their advantage. The progenitor fleet, their command structure in disarray from the psychic assault, began to falter. One by one, their ships sustained critical damage, forcing them to retreat. As the immediate threat subsided, Brian and Iris allowed themselves a moment of relief. Their hands found each other, fingers intertwining as they shared a look of exhausted triumph. But their respite was short-lived. The friendly progenitor emissary materialized in the command center, its presence drawing all eyes. You have fought bravely, it intoned, but this conflict is just getting started. I come with an offer and a warning. Brian and Iris tensed, their shared consciousness alert to the gravity of the moment. They listened intently as the emissary revealed the true nature of the progenitor schism and offered advanced defensive technology. As debates erupted among the station's leadership, Brian tugged gently on Iris's hand. Without a word, they slipped away from the commotion, seeking a moment of privacy to process the emissary's revelation. In the quiet of their quarters, their mental link buzzed with a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The weight of the decision before them, to accept the progenitor technology and become embroiled in an ancient conflict or to stand alone, pressed heavily on their minds. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. As one, they moved closer, their lips meeting in a kiss that was both tender and urgent. Their enhanced bond magnified every sensation, every emotion, until the universe seemed to narrow to just the two of them. The moment was shattered by a violent tremor that shook the station. Alarms blared as they broke apart, their minds instantly alert and in sync. "The progenitors," Iris gasped. "They're back." Without another word, they raced back to the command center, ready to face whatever new challenge awaited them. As they ran, their hands clasped tightly together, Brian and Iris knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it united, in body, mind, and spirit. Spirit. The alarms blared once more, but this time it wasn't the progenitors. As Brian and Iris burst into the command center, they were met with a scene of controlled chaos. Crew members frantically worked at their stations, their faces illuminated by the flashing red emergency lights. Commander Steele turned to them, his expression grim. "We've got multiple system failures across the station. The battle took a heavier toll than we thought." Brian and Iris shared a look, their mental link buzzing with shared concern. Without hesitation, they stepped forward, ready to tackle this new crisis. "We'll coordinate the repair efforts," Brian said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Iris, can you interface with the Krenim systems? We need a full diagnostic." Iris nodded, her fingers already flying over a nearby console. As she worked, Brian closed his eyes, focusing on their shared consciousness to process the influx of information. "Power grid is unstable," Iris reported, her voice tight with concentration. "Life support systems are operating at 60% capacity. We've got hull breaches on levels 3, 7, and 12. Brian's eyes snapped open. "We need to prioritize. Life support first, then power stabilization. I'll head down to the maintenance shafts to manually reroute power." As Brian made his way through the cramped tunnels, Iris's voice guided him through their mental link. Her Krenim knowledge of the station's systems, combined with his human intuition, allowed them to make quick decisions and implement fixes on the fly. Hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Brian emerged from the maintenance shafts, his face streaked with sweat and grime, to find Iris coordinating repair teams from various species. Their eyes met across the bustling command center, a moment of connection amidst the chaos. Just as they thought they were getting the situation under control, a new alert sounded. Iris's eyes widened as she read the incoming data. "Brian, we've got a problem," she said, her voice tense. "Long-range sensors are picking up something unusual." Brian hurried to her side, peering at the screen. A swarm of tiny dots was approaching the station, moving in patterns that defied natural phenomena. "What are they?" he asked, a sense of unease growing in his gut. Before Iris could respond, the dots began to infiltrate the station's outer hull. Alarms blared anew as systems started behaving erratically. "Nanobots," Iris breathed, her fingers flying over the console as she attempted to analyze the intruders. "They appear to be remnants of the collapsed wormhole's exotic matter." Brian's mind raced, processing the implications. "We need to contain them before they spread too far. Can we isolate the affected areas?" Iris shook her head. "They're too small, too numerous. They're already infiltrating our systems, causing unpredictable alterations." Brian's eyes lit up with an idea. "My size, I can navigate the maintenance shafts, track their spread. If we can understand their behavior, maybe we can find a way to control them." Iris nodded, her concern evident through their bond. "Be careful," she said softly, squeezing his hand. As Brian set off into the maze of maintenance tunnels, Iris coordinated with the station's scientific team. Her Krenim knowledge proved invaluable as they analyzed the nanobots' behavior. Through their mental link, Brian relayed his observations as he tracked the nanobots' progress. They seem to be drawn to certain types of energy emissions, he reported, watching as the microscopic machines swarmed around a power coupling. Iris's excitement sparked through their bond. That's it. They respond to specific electromagnetic frequencies. If we can isolate the right frequency, we can control them, Brian finished, their minds working in perfect sync. With this revelation, they worked tirelessly to develop a containment strategy. Brian's human intuition allowed him to predict the nanobots' movements, while Iris's scientific expertise helped fine-tune the electromagnetic pulses used to herd them. As they made progress against the nanobot threat, a new challenge emerged. A distress signal reached Unity Station, its origin a nearby Krenim colony world. The planet's experiencing severe geological instability, Commander Steele announced, his face grave. They're requesting immediate assistance. Brian and Iris exchanged a look, their shared consciousness already formulating a plan. We should lead a rescue mission, Brian said, turning to the commander. It's an opportunity to strengthen human-Krenim relations, and we might be able to secure resources for the station? Steele nodded, his expression a mix of concern and approval. Assemble a team. You leave in 1 hour. As they prepared for the mission, Brian and Iris found themselves working in close proximity, their enhanced bond humming with shared purpose and unspoken emotions. The challenges they'd faced had only strengthened their connection. But as they boarded the modified shuttle with their assembled team, both knew that greater tests lay ahead. The shuttle's engines thrummed to life, ethereal cloaking technology shimmering around them as they departed Unity Station. Brian and Iris sat side by side in the cockpit, their hands briefly intertwining before reaching for the controls. As the stars streaked past, they steeled themselves for the unknown dangers that awaited them on the unstable Krenim world. As they approached the unstable Krenim colony, Brian's mind raced with concern for the mission ahead. However, their focus was abruptly shattered by an urgent transmission from Unity Station. Return immediately, Commander Steele's voice crackled through the comm. We have a critical situation. Exchanging worried glances, Brian and Iris maneuvered the shuttle back toward the station. As they approached, their eyes widened at the sight before them. Unity's sleek exterior was marred by strange, organic-looking growths that pulsed with an eerie light. What happened? Brian whispered, his voice tight with tension. Iris's fingers flew over the controls, scanning the station. The nanobots, she breathed. They've evolved beyond our containment measures. As they docked, they were met by a grim-faced Commander Steele. The infestation is spreading rapidly, he reported. We've lost control of entire sections of the station. Brian and Iris hurried to the command center, their enhanced bond buzzing with shared anxiety. The screens displayed a nightmarish transformation of Unity's interior. Walls rippled with biomechanical growths, and corridors twisted into impossible geometries. We need to stop this, Brian said, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at his gut. He closed his eyes, drawing on the progenitor knowledge that now resided in his mind. These nanobots, they're not random. They're created technology, possibly linked to the hostile progenitor faction. Iris nodded, her face set with perseverance. We need to track their communication patterns. If we can disrupt their signal, we might be able to halt their progress. As they worked tirelessly to contain the spread, Unity Station received an unexpected visitor. A massive Krenim warship, the KSS Titan, dropped out of warp space near the station. Its imposing silhouette dwarfed Unity, casting a shadow over the beleaguered station. This is Admiral Krell of the KSS Titan, a stern voice announced over the comm. I demand to speak with the human, known as Brian, immediately. Commander Steele frowned, exchanging worried glances with Brian and Iris. Admiral Krell is known for his skepticism towards human Krenim cooperation, he explained quietly. This could complicate things. Despite the urgency of the nanobot crisis, they had no choice but to meet with the Krenim Admiral. Brian, Iris, Commander Steele, and the Krenim Security Chief Voros gathered in Unity's conference room as Admiral Krell materialized via hologram. The Admiral's piercing gaze fixed on Brian. We have concerns about your access to progenitor technology, he stated bluntly. For the security of the Krenim people, I insist you come with us for further study and protection. Iris stepped forward, her eyes flashing. Absolutely not, she said firmly. Brian is essential to our efforts here. We're in the middle of a crisis. Her words were cut off as the station shuddered violently. Alarms blared, and the hologram flickered. The nanobots have breached containment, a panicked voice shouted over the comm. They're infiltrating critical systems. Brian's mind raced, processing the influx of information from his progenitor knowledge. Admiral, he said urgently, we need your help. These nanobots are more than just a random occurrence. They're trying to build something, a communication array to contact their creators. Admiral Krell's expression shifted from skepticism to concern. Explain, he demanded. As Brian outlined his theory and proposed using the partially built array to trace the signal back to its source, the Admiral's demeanor changed. The immediate threat to Unity Station and the potential to uncover a hostile progenitor base seemed to override his initial misgivings. Very well, Admiral Krell said grudgingly. We will assist in this operation. But make no mistake, human, this doesn't change my concerns about your access to progenitor technology. With the combined resources of Unity Station and the KSS Titan, they launched a coordinated effort to contain the nanobot infestation and trace its origin. Brian and Iris, leveraging their enhanced bond, prepared to enter the transformed sections of the station. As they donned protective gear, Iris gripped Brian's hand tightly. Be careful, she said softly. Your mind is still adjusting to the progenitor knowledge. Don't push yourself too hard. Brian nodded, squeezing her hand in return. We'll do this together, he assured her. They stepped into the airlock, the door hissing shut behind them. As it cycled open on the other side, they were confronted with a landscape that defied comprehension. The familiar corridors of Unity had been transformed into a surreal, biomechanical maze. Walls pulsed with veins of energy, and strange growths reached out with questing tendrils. Brian and Iris moved cautiously through this alien environment, their mental link allowing them to navigate the constantly shifting terrain. As they approached the heart of the nanobot infestation, they could sense the hum of the partially constructed communication array. There, Brian said, pointing to a pulsating mass of technology and organic matter. That's the core of the array. They carefully made their way towards it, aware that any misstep could trigger an aggressive response from the nanobots. As they reached the array, Brian took a deep breath and placed his hands on its surface. Immediately, his mind was flooded with a torrent of data. Iris steadied him as he swayed, her own consciousness intertwining with his, to help process the overwhelming influx of information. Through their shared perception, they began to unravel the complex signal patterns of the nanobots. Images flashed through their minds, glimpses of strange alien architecture, fleets of ships unlike anything they'd seen before, and vast networks of wormholes connecting distant parts of the galaxy. As they delved deeper into the signal, tracing it back to its source, Brian felt a searing pain in his head. Blood trickled from his nose, and he could sense Iris's growing concern through their bond. We're close, he gasped, pushing through the pain. Just a little more. Suddenly, the signal crystallized into a clear location, a hidden progenitor outpost in a nearby asteroid field. As the coordinates locked into place, Brian stumbled back, his connection to the array severed. Iris caught him, her face pale with worry. Brian, your nose. He wiped the blood away, his knees going weak from the experience. We did it, he said weakly. We found them. As they made their way back to the command center, Brian's vision swam with flashes of progenitor memories. The line between his own thoughts and the ancient knowledge in his mind blurred, leaving him disoriented. Iris guided him, her presence in their shared consciousness a steady anchor. Stay with me, she murmured. Focus on my voice. They emerged from the transformed section of the station to find Admiral Krell waiting with Commander Steele. The Krenim Admiral's eyes widened as he took in their disheveled appearance. We have the location, Iris reported, supporting Brian as he swayed on his feet. A progenitor outpost in the nearby asteroid field. As the implications of this discovery sank in, the station's long-range sensors suddenly lit up with activity. Multiple unidentified objects appeared on the screens, rapidly approaching from the direction of the asteroid field. Commander Steele's face paled. It seems our discovery hasn't gone unnoticed, he said grimly. Brian straightened, pushing aside his discomfort. We need to act fast, he said, his voice stronger than he felt. Whatever's coming, we need to be ready. As the unidentified objects drew closer, Brian, Iris, and the others raced to formulate a plan. The fate of Unity Station, and perhaps the entire sector, now hung in the balance, with the true nature of the progenitor threat about to reveal itself. The command center erupted into a flurry of activity as the unidentified objects drew closer, their signatures unlike anything in Unity's database. Brian squinted at the display, his mind racing to process the influx of information from his progenitor knowledge. Those aren't ship, he said, his voice tight with urgency. They're automated defense drones. Admiral Krell's eyes narrowed. How can you be certain? The energy signatures, Brian explained, pointing to the readouts. They match progenitor defense protocols I've seen before. Commander Steele nodded grimly. We need a plan, and fast. A two-pronged approach, Iris suggested, her mind working in tandem with Brian's. We engage the drones in space while a team infiltrates the outpost to deactivate the defense systems. Admiral Krell's mandibles clicked in agreement. The Titan can provide cover fire, but who will lead the infiltration team? Brian and Iris exchanged a look, their enhanced bond humming with shared purpose. We will, they said in unison. Minutes later, Brian and Iris found themselves aboard a modified shuttle, joined by a select group of human and Krenim specialists. The craft's etheric cloaking technology shimmered around them as they prepared to launch. Be careful out there, Commander Steele's voice crackled over the comm. We'll do our best to keep those drones occupied. As the shuttle bay doors opened, they caught a glimpse of the KSS Titan moving into position, its massive form eclipsing the stars. The shuttle shot forward, immediately engulfed in a chaotic dance of weapons fire and debris. Iris's hands flew over the controls, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to navigate the treacherous field. Brian gripped his seat, his smaller frame jostled by each evasive maneuver. There, he shouted, pointing to a particularly dense cluster of asteroids. The outpost is hidden in that formation. As they approached, the true scale of the progenitor structure became apparent. The asteroid's surface was a latticework of ancient technology, pulsing with ethereal energy. They landed in a narrow crevice, the shuttle's cloaking field flickering as it powered down. Brian was the first to step out, his compact size allowing him to squeeze through a gap in the rocky surface. It's clear, he called back, but we'll need to make this opening bigger for the others. Iris nodded, flexing her powerful muscles. With a grunt of effort, she began to widen the opening, chunks of rock and metal falling away under her strength. As the team assembled on the asteroid's surface, Brian felt a familiar pressure building behind his eyes. He blinked, trying to focus on the task at hand. This way, he said, pointing to a faint glow emanating from deeper within the structure. The control center should be in that direction. They moved cautiously through the twisting corridors, encountering a series of increasingly complex security measures. Energy barriers sprang to life, forcing them to backtrack and find alternate routes. Gravity shifted unpredictably, sending team members floating or slamming to the ground without warning. Brian's progenitor knowledge proved invaluable in navigating these obstacles, but each use of his abilities took a visible toll. By the time they reached a massive door that could only be the entrance to the control center, blood trickled from his nose, and his steps had become unsteady. Iris caught his arm as he swayed. Brian, you're pushing yourself too hard, she said, her voice tight with concern. He shook his head, trying to clear the fog that threatened to overwhelm him. We're almost there. I can do this. Iris's eyes narrowed in dedication. Not alone, she said firmly. Let me help. Our bond. Maybe we can share the burden. Before Brian could protest, Iris placed her hands on either side of his face, their foreheads touching. Their mental link flared to life, stronger than ever before. Brian gasped as he felt Iris's consciousness intertwining with his own, creating a shared mental space where progenitor knowledge and Krenim intuition merged seamlessly. Together, they approached the control panel. Their hands moved in perfect synchronization, inputting complex sequences as if they'd done it 1,000 times before. The massive door slid open with a low hum, revealing a cavernous chamber beyond. At the center of the room stood a pulsating column of light, the progenitor AI core. As Brian and Iris approached, tendrils of energy reached out, probing their linked minds. Suddenly, Brian's knees buckled as a tidal wave of progenitor memories crashed over him. Iris caught him, cradling his smaller form against her chest as she fought to maintain their mental connection. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice echoing in their shared consciousness. "We can do this together." As one, they reached out to the AI, their unique human cranium perspective, creating an interface the ancient system had never encountered before. The AI's curiosity was palpable, its millennia of isolation giving way to a flood of inquiries. Through their combined efforts, Brian and Iris explained the current state of the galaxy, the alliance between humans and cranium, the challenges they faced, and the potential for peaceful coexistence and shared advancement. The AI processed this information, its initial defensive protocols wavering in the face of this new paradigm. Finally, it spoke, its voice resonating directly in their minds. "Your symbiosis is unexpected," the AI mused. "Perhaps it is time for new protocols to be implemented." With that, the defense drones powering down, their threat neutralized. The AI then offered access to its vast database of progenitor knowledge, a gift that left Brian and Iris reeling with possibilities. As they prepared to leave the outpost, Brian and Iris became aware of a profound change in their mental link. Their connection had deepened beyond anything they'd experienced before, allowing them to share not just thoughts, but sensations and emotions on an unprecedented level. They made their way back to the shuttle in silence, both exhilarated and terrified by the implications of their new bond. As Unity Station came into view, they knew that their journey was just the beginning. The challenges ahead would test not only their new abilities, but also the very nature of their relationship and its impact on the future of human cranium relations. And its impact on the future of human cranium cooperation. As the shuttle docked with Unity Station, Brian and Iris exchanged a silent glance, their newly deepened bond humming with shared excitement and trepidation. The weight of their discovery pressed upon them, along with the strange new sensations of their enhanced connection. Commander Steele and Admiral Krell were waiting as they disembarked, their faces a mix of relief and curiosity. "Welcome back," Steele said, his eyes darting between the two. "We need a full debriefing immediately." Minutes later, they gathered in the station's secure conference room. Brian and Iris took turns recounting their experience at the progenitor outpost, their words sometimes overlapping as they finished each other's sentences. As Brian described the AI's decision to share its vast database, a sudden wave of dizziness washed over him. The room spun, and he felt himself falling. "Brian!" Iris cried, catching him before he hit the ground. Her strong arms cradled his smaller frame as she lowered him gently to the floor. Through their mental link, Iris could sense the chaos in Brian's mind, a torrent of progenitor knowledge threatening to overwhelm him. She focused intently, using their connection to help stabilize his thoughts. "We need medical assistance," Commander Steele barked into his comm unit. Dr. Zara, who had been monitoring the situation from nearby, burst into the room. "I'll take charge of his care," she announced, her scales shimmering with concern as she knelt beside Brian. As the cranium geologist began her examination, Brian's eyes fluttered open. He looked up at Iris, their gazes locking. In that moment, their mental link flared, and a surge of information passed between them. "The nebula?" Brian gasped, his voice weak but urgent. "There's a hidden progenitor facility. We need to go there." Admiral Krell's mandibles clicked with interest. "What kind of facility?" Before Brian could answer, Dr. Zara interrupted. "He needs rest and a full medical evaluation. We can discuss this later." As they moved Brian to the medical bay, tension filled the air. Commander Steele and Admiral Krell began a heated discussion about the implications of this new discovery. In the medical bay, Iris refused to leave Brian's side. She sat beside his bed, her hand resting lightly on his arm as Dr. Zara ran a series of scans. "His neural activity is off the charts," Dr. Zara muttered, her eyes wide as she studied the readings. "And yours?" She glanced at Iris. "Is synchronizing with his." I've never seen anything like this. As Dr. Zara reached out to adjust a sensor on Brian's forehead, her hand accidentally brushed against his. A jolt of energy surged through all three of them, causing them to gasp in unison. In that brief moment, images flashed through their minds. A swirling nebula, a hidden structure pulsing with energy, and glimpses of technology beyond their comprehension. "Did you see that?" Brian asked, sitting up abruptly. Iris nodded, her eyes wide. "The facility, it's real. And it's not just data storage." Dr. Zara stumbled back, her scales rippling with excitement and fear. What just happened?" Before they could discuss further, the door slid open, revealing Commander Steele and Admiral Krell. The two leaders entered, their faces grim. "We need to talk about this nebula," Steele said, "and the potential consequences of pursuing this progenitor technology." As they debated the risks and potential benefits, Brian and Iris shared a silent conversation through their link. They could sense the growing tension between the human and Krenim leaders, threatening to fracture their alliance. "We have a proposal," Iris announced, cutting through the argument. All eyes turned to her as she outlined their plan for a joint expedition. As discussions progressed, Unity Station's alert system suddenly blared to life. Red lights flashed, and a computerized voice announced, "Unknown vessels approaching. All personnel to battle stations." They rushed to the command center, where a holographic display showed a fleet of sleek, unfamiliar ships entering the system. "Energy signatures don't match anything in our database," a technician reported. As they watched, a transmission came through. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a being unlike any they had encountered before. A seamless blend of organic and technological components. "Greetings, inhabitants of Unity Station," the being said, its voice resonating with an otherworldly timbre. "I am Zix, ambassador of the Vex. We come seeking knowledge and offering an exchange." Brian and Iris exchanged a glance, their enhanced bond thrumming with a mix of anticipation and unease. As Commander Steele stepped forward to respond to this unexpected first contact, they knew that the discoveries they had made at the progenitor outpost were about to have far-reaching consequences, not just for humans and Krenim, but potentially for the entire galaxy. The tension in the command center was palpable as Commander Steele stepped forward to address the alien ambassador. "Greetings, Zix of the Vex," Steele said, his voice steady despite the unexpected situation. "We are the United Human Krenim Alliance. What kind of knowledge do you seek, and what do you offer in return?" As diplomatic discussions began, Brian and Iris exchanged a meaningful glance. Through their enhanced bond, they shared a mutual understanding. The progenitor technology they had just discovered could be crucial in this new encounter. Hours later, after intense negotiations and information exchange, Unity Station's leadership convened to discuss the next steps. The decision was made to proceed with a joint expedition to the progenitor facility in the nebula, now including representatives from the newly encountered Vex species. Brian, Iris, and Dr. Zara were selected to lead the mission, their unique experiences and abilities making them ideal candidates. A diverse team was assembled, combining the strengths of humans, Krenim, and Vex. As they boarded the specially modified vessel, a fusion of technologies from all three species, Brian felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. The ship's sleek design incorporated Vex bioorganic components, Krenim energy systems, and human navigational interfaces. The expedition departed Unity Station, the nebula looming before them like a vast, swirling canvas of cosmic hues. As they entered its outer fringes, the ship began to shudder and shake. "Gravitational distortions detected," the pilot announced, her hands flying over the controls. "Energy fluctuations increasing." Brian closed his eyes, reaching out with his enhanced connection to progenitor technology. In his mind's eye, he saw patterns in the chaos, pathways through the turbulence. "Adjust course 3 degrees starboard," he said, his voice calm but strained. "There's a stable corridor we can follow." As the ship navigated the treacherous space, Brian stood at the helm, guiding them through each twist and turn. Suddenly, a violent tremor rocked the vessel. Brian lost his footing, stumbling backward. Iris reacted instantly, her powerful arms catching him before he could fall. For a moment they were pressed together, their faces inches apart. Brian, no longer dwarfed by Iris's crinum stature, found himself at eye level with her. A spark of electricity seemed to pass between them, their enhanced bond amplifying the physical contact. "Thang," Brian murmured, his heart racing from more than just the near fall. Iris nodded, her eyes lingering on his for a beat longer than necessary before she steadied him on his feet. The moment was broken by Dr. Zara's excited voice. "Look, there it is!" On the interface, a seemingly unremarkable asteroid came into view, but to Brian's enhanced senses, it pulsed with hidden energy. As they approached, the asteroid's surface erupted with beams of searing energy, targeting their ship with deadly precision. "Evasive maneuvers," Zix called out, their Vex reflexes allowing them to anticipate the attack patterns. Dr. Zara's eyes narrowed as she studied the asteroid's composition. "There," she shouted, pointing to a specific region. "That section shows signs of artificial reinforcement. It must be covering an entrance." The pilot skillfully maneuvered the ship, avoiding the majority of the energy beams. A well-placed shot from their weapons struck the weak point Dr. Zara had identified, creating a breach in the asteroid's defenses. With a bone-jarring thud, their ship landed inside the progenitor facility. As the team prepared to disembark, Brian addressed the group. "We'll split into 2 teams to cover more ground," he said. "Iris, Zix, and I will explore the central areas. Dr. Zara, you lead the second team to investigate the outer sections." As they stepped into the facility, Brian was struck by the scale of the structure. Massive corridors stretched out before them, pulsing with an otherworldly light. The air hummed with energy, making the hair on Brian's arms stand on end. Brian's team made their way deeper into the complex, encountering increasingly advanced progenitor artifacts. Zix's bio-organic components seemed to resonate with some of the technology, allowing them to interface with systems that had long lain dormant. Finally, they reached a vast chamber dominated by a pulsating bio-organic computer. Its tendrils stretched across the walls and ceiling, creating a living network of information. "This must be the central control room," Brian said, approaching the main interface. As he reached out to connect with the system, a surge of energy coursed through his body. Brian gasped, dropping to his knees as pain lanced through every nerve. "Brian!" Iris cried out, rushing to his side. Before their eyes, Brian's body began to change. His muscles swelled and reshaped, bones elongating and strengthening. He cried out in agony as his form rapidly altered. Iris and Zix worked in tandem, their diverse knowledge and abilities combining as they fought to stabilize Brian's condition. Zix's tendrils interfaced with the progenitor technology, while Iris used their mental link to help Brian weather the transformation. Suddenly, a burst of energy erupted from the central computer, enveloping all 3 of them. For a moment, their minds and bodies seemed to merge, sharing sensations and thoughts in a whirlwind of consciousness. As the energy subsided, Brian slowly rose to his feet. He stood tall, his frame now nearly matching Iris's impressive crinum height. The change was more than physical. Brian could feel new pathways in his mind, a deeper connection to the progenitor technology around them. Iris stared at him, her eyes wide with a mix of concern and something else, a newfound attraction that their bond couldn't hide. The tension between them was palpable. Their physical compatibility suddenly altered in ways neither had anticipated. Before they could address the change, an alarm blared through the facility. Red lights flashed and a deep rumbling shook the floor beneath their feet. "The power core," Zix said, their voice urgent. "It's becoming unstable." As they raced towards the source of the disturbance, Brian's mind whirled with the implications of what had just occurred. But there was no time to dwell on personal matters. The fate of the expedition, and perhaps much more, hung in the balance as they rushed to prevent a catastrophic meltdown within the heart of the progenitor facility. The team raced through the corridors, their footsteps echoing off the ancient walls as they sought to prevent a catastrophic meltdown. As they reached the power core, Dr. Zara's voice crackled over the comms. "We've stabilized the situation here. The core's energy fluctuations are normalizing." The crisis averted, Brian leaned against a nearby console, suddenly aware of his altered physique. His newly elongated limbs felt awkward, and he struggled to maintain his balance. Iris approached him, concern evident in her eyes. "Are you all right?" Brian nodded, straightening up. "Just, adjusting. This is going to take some getting used to." Over the next few days, as the damaged ship underwent repairs, Brian found himself assisting in ways he never could have before. His increased height and strength proved invaluable in accessing hard-to-reach components of the ship's engine. During a break from the repair efforts, Iris approached Brian as he examined his reflection in a polished panel. "How are you handling the changes?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. Brian flexed his hand, marveling at the increased muscle definition. "It's strange. I feel more capable, but also out of sync with myself." Iris nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Perhaps I can help you adjust. We Krenim have experience with rapid physical development." Over the following days, Iris guided Brian through a series of exercises designed to improve his coordination and spatial awareness. Their training sessions became a welcome respite from the tension of their mission. Meanwhile, Dr. Zara's investigation of the hybrid stasis pods yielded a significant breakthrough. She discovered a control panel that allowed for the safe awakening of one of the subjects. "We have an opportunity to learn directly from one of these hybrids," Dr. Zara announced to the team. "I propose we revive this subject here." She indicated a pod containing a being that appeared to be a combination of human and Krenim DNA. After a heated debate, the team agreed to proceed. Brian and Iris stood side by side, their newly matched heights allowing them to share a meaningful glance as the awakening process began. The pod hissed open, revealing a female figure. Her eyes fluttered open, a mix of human irises and Krenim bioluminescence. Where am I?" she asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. "You're safe," Dr. Zara assured her. "Can you tell us your name?" The hybrid being sat up slowly, taking in her surroundings. "Lyra. My name is Lyra." As Lyra regained her strength, she shared invaluable information about the facility's purpose and the progenitor's ultimate goal of creating a unified galactic society through biological compatibility. Zix, the Vex ambassador, expressed great interest in Lyra's unique physiology. "Our biotechnology could unlock new possibilities through analysis of her genetic makeup," Zix proposed, their bioorganic components pulsing with excitement. This suggestion sparked a heated debate among the team. Some saw it as an opportunity for groundbreaking research, while others raised ethical concerns about subjecting Lyra to further experimentation. As discussions continued, Brian and Iris found themselves drawn to an unexplored section of the facility. Their enhanced connection to the progenitor technology led them to a chamber containing a device unlike anything they had encountered before. Brian approached the console, his fingers hovering over the controls. I think this is designed for controlled genetic modification," he said, his voice filled with awe. Iris examined the device closely. "The implications of this are staggering. If we could safely alter and enhance various species' characteristics..." Brian nodded, completing her thought. "It could revolutionize interspecies relations." As Brian tentatively activated the device, a holographic display sprang to life, showcasing its potential applications. However, their discovery was cut short as alarms blared throughout the facility. "The security systems," Iris exclaimed. "They must have been triggered by the device's activation." Brian's enhanced hearing picked up the sound of heavy doors slamming shut throughout the complex. "We're going into lockdown. We need to stop it." Without hesitation, Brian sprinted towards a narrow access shaft. "I can reach the manual override through here," he called out, his new physique allowing him to squeeze through the tight space with surprising agility. Iris nodded, already moving towards a nearby terminal. "I'll work on hacking the security mainframe. Be careful." As Brian navigated the cramped shaft, Iris's fingers flew over the holographic interface, her Krenim technical expertise put to the ultimate test. The rest of the team worked frantically to maintain their systems and protect their discoveries. Just as the final blast doors began to seal, Brian reached the override switch. With a grunt of effort, he pulled the massive lever, feeling the mechanism give way under his enhanced strength. Simultaneously, Iris broke through the last firewall. "I'm in!" she shouted triumphantly. The lockdown halted, but not before a long-range distress signal was sent out. As the team regrouped, they realized the gravity of their situation. That signal could attract unwanted attention, Commander Steele warned. We need to accelerate our timeline. As if in response to his words, the long-range sensors blinked to life. Multiple vessels were approaching the nebula, their signatures matching those of the hostile progenitor faction they had encountered earlier. The atmosphere in the facility grew tense as the team raced to prepare for their departure. Debates over the use of progenitor technology and Lyra's future continued, but now with an added sense of urgency. In a rare moment of calm, Brian and Iris found themselves alone in a quiet corner of the facility. The stress of their situation and their evolving physical compatibility hung heavy in the air between them. Iris, Brian began, his voice low, I don't know what's going to happen when we leave this place, but His words were cut off as Iris closed the distance between them, pulling him into a passionate embrace. For a moment, the chaos around them faded away as they gave in to the attraction that had been building since Brian's transformation. Their intimate moment was shattered by a piercing alert from the facility's systems. The approaching vessels had begun to breach the nebula's outer defenses. Brian and Iris broke apart, their eyes meeting with a mixture of longing and persistence. Without a word, they turned and raced back to the command center, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the hostile ships drew nearer, the expedition team scrambled to finalize their plans, secure their discoveries, and prepare for the impending confrontation. The fate of not just their mission, but potentially the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. Balance as the hostile ships closed in. The team's frantic preparations took on a new urgency as alarms blared throughout the facility. Brian, his newly enhanced physique proving invaluable, moved swiftly through the corridors alongside Iris. They worked in tandem, their movements synchronized as they installed makeshift energy barriers at key junctions. Pass me that power coupling, Brian called out, reaching up to secure a section of shimmering blue energy that crackled between two pylons. Iris tossed him the device, which he caught effortlessly with his elongated arm. These barriers won't hold for long, Iris said, her brow furrowed in concentration as she calibrated the energy output. But they should buy us some time. Across the facility, Dr. Zara's team raced against the clock to secure the hybrid stasis pods. Lyra, still adjusting to her awakening, assisted where she could, her unique blend of human and Crinim abilities proving unexpectedly useful. Careful with that one, Lyra warned as a technician maneuvered a pod onto a hovering transport. The stabilization matrix is sensitive to sudden movements. Dr. Zara nodded appreciatively. Your insight is invaluable, Lyra. We couldn't do this without you. Meanwhile, Zix's tendrils danced across the ship's control panels, interfacing directly with the systems. The Vex ambassador's bioorganic components pulsed with energy as they integrated cutting-edge stealth technology into the vessel's hull. Cloaking system at 87% efficiency, Zix announced, their voice a harmonious blend of organic and synthetic tones. Estimated completion time, 6 minutes. Commander Steele's voice crackled over the comms. We may not have 6 minutes. Enemy vessels are breaching the outer defenses now. As if in response to his words, the facility shuddered under the impact of distant explosions. Brian and Iris exchanged a glance, their heightened connection allowing them to communicate without words. They sprinted towards the command center, arriving just as a new alert flashed across the main screen. What is that? Brian asked, leaning in to examine the readout. Iris's eyes widened. It's a hangar, hidden behind a false wall in the lower levels. Within minutes, the team had assembled in the newly discovered hangar. 3 sleek, otherworldly vessels sat before them, their smooth lines and pulsating energy cores unlike anything they had seen before. Brian approached one of the ships, feeling a familiar tingle in his fingertips as he neared the control panel. Without conscious thought, his hand moved across the surface, and the ship hummed to life. These are progenitor scout ships, he said, his voice filled with awe, and I think I can fly them. A plan quickly took shape. Brian, Iris, and Zix would pilot the scout ships, creating a diversion to draw away the hostile forces. The rest of the team would evacuate on the main expedition vessel, carrying the precious cargo of stasis pods and gathered data. As the others rushed to make final preparations, Brian pulled Iris aside. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of their impending mission hanging between them. "Iris, Brian began, but she silenced him with a kiss. Their bodies pressed together, a perfect fit now that Brian's form had changed. The kiss deepened, fueled by the intensity of their situation and the newfound physical compatibility they shared. When they finally parted, both were breathless. Iris cupped Brian's face in her hands. "We'll finish this conversation when we're safe," she said, her eyes shining with dedication and something more. The moment was shattered by another impact, closer this time. They raced to their assigned scout ships, boarding quickly as the rest of the team boarded the main vessel. "All systems operational," Zix's voice came through the comm channel. "Launching in 3, 2, 1. The hangar doors slid open, revealing the chaos of space beyond. Flashes of weapons fire illuminated the nebula's swirling gases as the 3 scout ships shot forward, immediately drawing the attention of the nearest enemy vessels. Brian's hands moved across the controls with uncanny precision, the ship responding to his thoughts almost before he could form them. They weaved through the nebula's natural obstacles, using the scout ship's superior maneuverability to stay ahead of their pursuers. "2 bogeys on your 6, Brian," Iris called out. He banked hard, narrowly avoiding a barrage of energy blasts. Suddenly, Brian's ship shuddered violently. A warning light flashed on his console. "I'm hit!" he shouted, struggling to maintain control. "I need to set down. There's an asteroid at coordinates 267 Mark IV. "I see it," Iris responded immediately. "I'm right behind you." As Brian fought to guide his damaged vessel to a landing, Iris broke formation to cover him. Zix, recognizing the situation, moved to intercept the approaching enemy ships. "Go," the Vex ambassador's calm voice came through the comms. "I will provide adequate distraction." Brian's ship skidded across the asteroid's surface, coming to rest precariously near the edge of a deep crater. He had barely released his harness when Iris's ship touched down nearby. She raced towards him, her long strides eating up the distance between them. "Are you all right?" she asked, helping him from the cockpit. "I'm fine," Brian assured her, wincing slightly as he tested his weight on his leg. "But we need to—" His words were cut off as a brilliant flash of light erupted from his damaged scout ship. The control panel had come to life, displaying a complex series of glyphs that seemed to dance before his eyes. "It's some kind of weapon system," Brian said, his mind racing to interpret the information flooding his consciousness. "If I can just—" His fingers flew across the panel, guided by an instinct he couldn't fully explain. A low hum built to a crescendo, and then a pulse of energy burst forth from the ship. It expanded outward in a rippling wave, washing over the nearby enemy vessels. One by one, the hostile ships went dark, their systems temporarily overloaded by the progenitor weapon. "Now's our chance," Iris said, pulling Brian towards her scout ship. "We need to regroup with the others and get out of here." As they squeezed into the single-pilot cockpit, Brian couldn't help but be acutely aware of their close proximity. Iris's breath tickled his neck as she reached around him to access the controls, sending a shiver down his spine, despite the urgency of their situation. They took off, leaving the disabled enemy ships behind. As they approached the rendezvous point, they saw the main expedition vessel decloaking, its hull shimmering as the Vex stealth technology disengaged. "All teams report in," Commander Steele's voice came through the comms. "Scout team here," Brian responded. "We're battered but alive." "Stasis pods secured," Dr. Zara added. "Lyra's been instrumental in keeping them stable during our escape." As they prepared to dock with the main ship, long-range sensors lit up with new contacts. A fleet of unidentified vessels was approaching rapidly from the direction of Unity Station. "Are those our reinforcements?" Iris wondered aloud, her voice tinged with hope and uncertainty. Brian studied the sensor readings, a knot forming in his stomach. "I'm not sure," he said grimly, "but something tells me our troubles are not nearly finished." The team held their breath as the unknown ships drew closer, the next phase of their adventure looming before them like the unknown depths of space itself. As the unknown ships drew closer, the tension aboard the expedition vessel reached a fever pitch. Brian and Iris, still crammed into the single-pilot cockpit of the scout ship, held their breath as the sensor readings became clearer. Suddenly, a familiar voice crackled over the comm channel. "This is Commander Steele of the Unity Station Joint Task Force. We're here to provide assistance and escort you to safety." A collective sigh of relief swept through the team. The reinforcements had arrived just in time. "Glad to hear your voice, Commander," Brian responded, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "We've got a lot to catch you up on." As the Unity Task Force engaged the pursuing progenitor ships, the expedition team made their way to the edge of the nebula. The space around them lit up with weapons fire as the reinforcements provided cover, allowing them to safely exit the turbulent gases and rendezvous with the larger fleet. The scout ship carrying Brian and Iris glided into the docking bay of the Unity Station flagship. As the airlock cycled, they shared a brief, intense look. Their physical proximity during the flight had only intensified the connection between them, and now, as the adrenaline began to fade, they became acutely aware of how their bodies fit together in the cramped space. When the airlock finally opened, they emerged onto the deck. Brian's newly transformed body allowed him to stand nearly eye to eye with Iris, a change that didn't go unnoticed by either of them. Their hands brushed as they exited the ship, sending a jolt of electricity through both of them. Across the hangar, Dr. Zara supervised the careful transfer of the stasis pods containing the hybrid beings. Her eyes kept darting to Lyra, who had insisted on helping despite her recent awakening. "Careful with that one," Lyra called out, her unique blend of human and Crinim features drawing curious glances from the Unity station crew. "The gravitational stabilizers are sensitive." Dr. Zara nodded approvingly. "Excellent catch, Lyra. Let's get these to the medical bay for a thorough examination." As the pods were wheeled away, 6 glided across the deck, their tendrils pulsing with a soft bioluminescence. The Vex ambassador approached a group of human, Crinim, and Vex leaders who had gathered to receive their report. "Esteemed colleagues," 6 began, their voice a harmonious blend of organic and synthetic tones, "the discoveries we've made at the progenitor facility are unprecedented." The assembled leaders leaned in as Zix began to detail their findings, particularly regarding the genetic modification device. Hushed whispers and sharp intakes of breath punctuated the presentation as the implications began to sink in. Meanwhile, Brian and Iris were led to separate debriefing rooms. As the doors closed behind them, they each felt a pang of loss at being separated after their harrowing experience. In his debriefing, Brian struggled to maintain his composure as he recounted the events in the progenitor facility. His hand unconsciously traced the altered contours of his face as he described his transformation. "And you say you can now interface directly with progenitor technology?" the intelligence officer asked, leaning forward with interest. Brian nodded, remembering the rush of information he'd experienced in the scout ship. "It's like the tech speaks to me. I can't explain it any other way." In the adjacent room, Iris was having a similar struggle. As she detailed their escape from the facility, she found her mind wandering to the moment she and Brian had shared in the quiet corner. Her cheeks flushed, and she stumbled over her words. The Crinim official conducting her debriefing raised an eyebrow. "Is there something else you'd like to add to your report, Lieutenant?" Iris straightened in her chair. "No, sir, just processing everything that happened." As the debriefings concluded, alarms blared throughout the station. The hostile progenitor forces had regrouped and were now in pursuit of the Unity fleet. Admiral Krell's voice boomed over the intercom. "All hands to battle stations. Set course for the Theta Epsilon system. We'll use the asteroid field there to our advantage." Brian and Iris rushed to the bridge, arriving just as the fleet began to maneuver into the dense field of space rocks. They exchanged a quick glance, their recent experiences allowing them to communicate volumes without a word. "Brian," Admiral Krell called out, "we need your expertise with the progenitor tech. Work with navigation to predict those gravitational anomalies." As Brian moved to the navigation console, his fingers tingling with anticipation, Iris approached the tactical station. "Admiral," she said, her mind racing with possibilities, "I have an idea for using the asteroid field to our advantage." Krell nodded, impressed by her initiative. "Let's hear it, Lieutenant." As Iris outlined her plan for setting up ambush points, Brian found himself marveling at her strategic mind. The respect in Admiral Krell's eyes was evident as he began implementing her suggestions. The Unity fleet weaved through the asteroid field, the massive rocks providing cover from the pursuing progenitor ships. Brian's enhanced senses allowed him to predict the gravitational shifts caused by the alien propulsion systems, guiding the fleet safely through the treacherous terrain. In the midst of the chaos, Brian and Iris found themselves working in perfect synchronization. Their complementary skills, combined with their newfound connection, allowed them to coordinate the fleet's movements with unprecedented efficiency. As the battle raged around them, Dr. Zara's voice came over the comms. "Admiral, I've made a breakthrough with the hybrid research. Their genetic makeup allows for superior interfacing with progenitor tech. This could be the edge we need." Krell's eyes lit up. "Excellent work, Doctor. How soon can we implement this?" Before Dr. Zara could respond, a blinding flash of energy lit up the viewport. A rogue progenitor weapon had struck the flagship, causing a violent shudder throughout the ship. "Hull breach detected in Section 4A, a panicked voice announced over the comms. "The medical bay is compromised." Brian and Iris locked eyes, a shared realization passing between them. The hybrid stasis pods were in danger. Without a word, they sprinted from the bridge, racing against time to secure the vulnerable beings that could hold the key to their survival. As they ran, alarms blared, and crew members rushed past them. The battle for the future of humanity raging both within and without the battered flagship. Unity flagship. As they ran, alarms blared and crew members rushed past them. The battle for the future of humanity raging both within and without the battered vessel. The ship shuddered violently as another impact rocked its structure. Brian and Iris stumbled, catching themselves against the corridor walls. Warning lights flashed, bathing the passageway in an eerie red glow. "Emergency decompression in Section 4A, a computerized voice announced. All personnel must don emergency spacesuits immediately." Brian and Iris exchanged a quick glance before veering towards a nearby equipment locker. They grabbed spacesuits and helped each other into them with practiced efficiency. As they sealed their helmets, the gravity in the corridor began to fluctuate. "We need to move fast," Iris said, her voice slightly distorted through the suit's comm system. "Those stasis pods won't last long without power." They pushed off from the wall, using their momentum to propel themselves down the corridor. The artificial gravity continued to falter, causing them to alternate between floating and stumbling as they made their way to the medical bay. Upon reaching the sealed doors, Brian placed his hand on the access panel. His enhanced connection to the ship's systems allowed him to override the lockdown protocols, and the doors hissed open. Inside, they found Dr. Zara frantically working at a control panel, her face etched with worry. The stasis pods containing the hybrid beings were arranged in a semicircle, their status lights flickering ominously. "Thank goodness you're here," Dr. Zara called out, her voice strained. "The power fluctuations are destabilizing the pods. We need to get them to a secure location immediately." Brian moved to the central console, his fingers dancing across the interface as he assessed the situation. "I can reroute power from non-essential systems," he said, his enhanced mind processing the complex ship schematics. "But it's only a temporary solution." As Brian worked on stabilizing the power, Iris began clearing a path through the debris that had accumulated during the attack. She lifted a fallen support beam with ease, her Krenim strength allowing her to move obstacles that would have taken several humans to budge. "Lyra's pod is showing the most instability," Dr. Zara reported, pointing to one of the stasis units. "We need to prioritize her evacuation." Iris carefully disconnected Lyra's pod from the main system, preparing it for transport. As she worked, she noticed the hybrid's vital signs becoming increasingly erratic. "Brian, something's wrong with Lyra," she called out. "Her readings are all over the place." Before Brian could respond, another explosion rocked the ship. He lost his footing and crashed into Iris, their bodies colliding in the confined space. For a moment, their enhanced bond flared to life, sending a surge of shared sensations coursing through them. Brian felt Iris's concern for the hybrids, her willpower to complete the mission, and something deeper, more personal. that made his breath catch in his throat. They quickly disentangled themselves, both acutely aware of the urgency of their situation. Brian returned to the console, his fingers flying across the controls as he worked to stabilize the remaining pods. "I've managed to reroute emergency power," he announced. "It should buy us some time, but we need to move quickly." As they began to disconnect the other stasis pods, Lyra's unit suddenly emitted a high-pitched whine. The pod's systems fluctuated wildly before shutting down completely. "We have to get her out," Dr. Zara shouted, already moving to release the pod seals. Brian and Iris rushed to help, carefully extracting Lyra from the malfunctioning unit. As they lifted her onto a nearby medical bed, Lyra's eyes snapped open. She gasped, her body convulsing as she struggled to orient herself. "Easy, Lyra," Iris said soothingly, placing a hand on the hybrid's shoulder. "You're safe. We're here to help." Lyra's eyes darted around the room, confusion and panic evident in her expression. Suddenly, her body began to glow with an otherworldly energy. Small arcs of electricity crackled across her skin, causing nearby equipment to spark and malfunction. "Her hybrid physiology is reacting to the stress," Dr. Zara explained, grabbing a medical scanner. "We need to stabilize her quickly, or she could compromise the entire evacuation." Brian's mind raced, drawing on his newly acquired knowledge of progenitor technology. "I have an idea," he said, moving to a storage unit in the corner of the room. "We can use components from the damaged stasis pod to create a makeshift isolation chamber. It should help contain her energy emissions." As Brian and Dr. Zara worked on constructing the chamber, Iris focused on calming Lyra. She spoke in soothing tones, using a combination of human reassurances and physiological techniques to help regulate the hybrid's breathing. "That's it, Lyra," Iris encouraged. "Focus on my voice. You're doing great." Gradually, the energy emanating from Lyra began to subside. By the time Brian and Dr. Zara had finished the isolation chamber, Lyra had regained enough control to assist in her own transfer. "This should help stabilize your condition," Brian explained as they sealed Lyra inside the chamber. "How are you feeling?" Lyra's voice came through a speaker on the chamber's exterior. "Better," she said, her tone steadier than before. "Thank you. I think I can help with the other pods." Before they could respond, Admiral Krell's voice crackled over the ship's communication system. "Brian, Iris, we need you on the bridge immediately. The progenitor forces are preparing for another major assault. We're going to need your expertise with those scout ships." Brian and Iris exchanged a look, the weight of the decision heavy between them. They had come so far to rescue the hybrids, but the entire fleet now hung in the balance. "We'll split up," Brian said finally, his voice resolute. "I'll take a scout ship and join the counteroffensive. Iris, you stay here and finish the evacuation with Dr. Zara and Lyra." Iris nodded, her expression a mix of concern and grit. "Be careful out there," she said, her hand briefly clasping Brian's arm. As Brian turned to leave, Iris pulled him close, their helmets clinking together. For a moment they stood there, foreheads touching, their enhanced bond allowing them to share a depth of emotion that words couldn't express. Then with a final nod, Brian was gone, racing towards the hangar bay to join the battle that would determine the fate of them all. Iris watched him go, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and something else she couldn't quite name. Then, squaring her shoulders, she turned back to Dr. Zara and Lyra. "All right," she said, her voice steady. "Let's get these hybrids to safety." Safety. With grit in her eyes, Iris turned to Dr. Zara and Lyra. "Let's move these pods to a more secure location." As they began disconnecting the remaining stasis units, a violent tremor shook the medical bay. The ship's hull groaned under the stress of another impact, and warning klaxons blared throughout the vessel. "Hull breach detected in adjacent sections," the ship's AI announced. "Emergency containment protocols activated." Iris's enhanced hearing picked up the faint hiss of escaping atmosphere. "We need to hurry," she urged, hefting 2 pods at once with her Krenim strength. Dr. Zara and Lyra worked quickly, disconnecting life support systems and preparing the pods for transport. As they moved the last unit, a deafening crash echoed through the bay. A support beam had collapsed, blocking their exit. "We're trapped," Dr. Zara gasped, her eyes wide with fear. Iris assessed the situation, her mind racing. "Not yet. We're not," she said, moving toward the debris. With a grunt of effort, she began lifting the massive beam, her enhanced muscles straining against the weight. As Iris cleared the path, the ship shuddered again. The damaged hull finally gave way, and the rush of escaping air intensified. Warning lights flashed as emergency force fields struggled to contain the breach. "The compartment's losing integrity," Dr. Zara shouted over the chaos. "We can't stay here." Iris looked at the vulnerable hybrid pods, then at Lyra. An idea formed in her mind. "Lyra, can you use your abilities to create a protective field around the pods?" Lyra hesitated, uncertainty flashing across her face. I'm not sure. I've never tried anything like that before." "You can do this," Iris encouraged, placing a hand on Lyra's shoulder. "Focus on the energy within you. Imagine it expanding outward, enveloping the pods." Lyra closed her eyes, concentrating. Slowly, a faint blue glow emanated from her body, spreading to encompass the stasis units. The energy field shimmered and pulsed, creating a barrier against the harsh environment. "Incredible," Dr. Zara breathed, watching in awe as Lyra's power manifested. With the pods protected, Iris turned her attention to their escape. She approached the sealed emergency hatch, assessing its locking mechanism. "Stand back," she warned before channeling her Krenim strength into a powerful kick. The hatch groaned and buckled under the impact. Iris struck again and again, until finally the metal gave way with a screech of torn alloys. Beyond lay a corridor bathed in the eerie red glow of emergency lighting. "Let's move," Iris commanded, helping Dr. Zara guide the floating stasis pods through the opening. Lyra followed, maintaining her concentration on the protective field. As they navigated the damaged sections of the flagship, they encountered pockets of vacuum and floating debris. Lyra's abilities proved invaluable, her energy field adapting to protect them from exposure to the void of space. Dr. Zara watched Lyra closely, her scientific mind racing with possibilities. "The stress of the situation seems to be accelerating the development of her abilities," she observed. "This could have significant implications for our understanding of hybrid physiology." They pressed on, making their way towards the nearest escape pod bay. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a section of the corridor open to space. The emergency force fields flickered weakly, struggling to maintain containment. Iris held up a hand, halting their progress. "Lyra, can you extend your field to create a safe passage?" Lyra nodded, her face etched with concentration. The blue energy expanded, forming a tunnel of breathable air through the damaged section. They moved quickly, guiding the pods through the hazardous area. As they reached the other side, Lyra's knees buckled. The strain of maintaining such a large field had taken its toll. Iris caught her before she could fall, supporting her weight. "You did amazingly," Iris reassured her. "Just a little further to the escape pods." They finally reached the pod bay, relief washing over them as the doors sealed behind them. Iris immediately began the process of loading the stasis units into the available craft. "Dr. Zara, start prepping the pods for launch," Iris instructed. "Lyra, can you interface with the escape pod systems? We need to optimize life support for the hybrids." Lyra nodded, placing her hands on the pod's control panel. Her eyes closed in concentration as she communed with the ship's systems, making the necessary adjustments. As they worked, Admiral Krell's voice crackled over the intercom. "Attention all personnel. We've received critical intelligence from Lieutenant Bryan. All units, prepare for tactical retreat and regroup. New attack formation to follow." Iris's heart skipped a beat at the mention of Bryan's name. She allowed herself a moment of relief knowing he was alive before refocusing on the task at hand. The ship rocked violently, nearly knocking them off their feet. A new alarm blared, its tone more urgent than before. Warning," the ship's AI announced. "Massive energy buildup detected in nearby star. Stellar stability compromised. All hands prepare for potential system-wide catastrophe." Iris exchanged a grim look with Dr. Zara and Lyra. The battle had taken an even more dangerous turn, and they were caught in the middle of it all. With renewed urgency, they redoubled their efforts to secure the hybrid pods and prepare for whatever challenges lay ahead. As the escape pod bay vibrated with the distant sounds of battle, Iris found herself hoping that Brian would make it back to the flagship soon. Something told her that they would need every advantage, every unique ability, to face the unprecedented threat that loomed on the horizon. The Unity fleet hung in the balance, caught between the progenitor forces and a star on the brink of collapse. As Iris sealed the last hybrid pod into place, she knew that the true test of their abilities and their newfound bond was yet to come. The escape pod bay shuddered as another tremor rippled through the ship. Iris steadied herself against the bulkhead, her enhanced reflexes keeping her upright. She glanced at Dr. Zara and Lyra, who were securing the last of the hybrid pods. That's all of them, Dr. Zara announced, wiping sweat from her brow. Before Iris could respond, the bay doors hissed open. Brian burst in, his face flushed and breathing heavy. "I made it," he gasped, his eyes immediately locking with Iris's. Relief flooded through her, but there was no time for reunions. Brian quickly approached the group, pulling out a data chip from his suit. "I've got crucial information from the progenitor battleship," he said, handing it to Dr. Zara. The scientist's eyes widened as she plugged the chip into her tablet. This is incredible," she muttered, her fingers flying across the screen. "With this data, I can significantly improve the stasis pod systems." As Dr. Zara worked, Brian and Iris moved to secure the remaining pods. Their movements were perfectly synchronized, lifting and maneuvering the heavy units with ease. Iris marveled at how their enhanced physiques complemented each other, allowing them to work with unprecedented efficiency. Lyra watched them, her brow furrowed in concentration. Suddenly, a shimmering blue field expanded from her body, enveloping the entire escape pod bay. "I think I can maintain this protective bubble," she said, her voice strained but steady. "It should protect us from any sudden hull breaches." Brian nodded appreciatively. "Good thinking, Lyra. That'll buy us some time." The ship's intercom crackled to life, Admiral Krell's voice cutting through the tension. "Lieutenant Brian, Specialist Iris, report to the bridge immediately. We have a critical mission for you." Exchanging a glance, Brian and Iris made their way to the bridge. The corridors were a flurry of activity, crew members rushing to their stations as the battle raged outside. Admiral Krell stood at the command console, his face grim. "We're initiating a multi-pronged strategy to neutralize the progenitor forces and disable their stellar manipulation device," he explained. "I need you two to infiltrate the device using one of the captured scout ships." Brian's eyes lit up. "With my knowledge of their tech and Iris's tactical expertise, we might have a shot at disabling it from within." As they discussed the mission parameters, Dr. Zara's voice came through on the comm. "Admiral, I've made a critical discovery," she said urgently. "The data Brian retrieved contains information about a fail-safe mechanism in the device. It could potentially reverse the star's destabilization." "What's the catch, Iris asked, sensing there was more. "It requires a unique genetic key," Dr. Zara continued, "one that matches the DNA profile of our hybrid beings." Silence fell over the bridge as the implication sank in. Then, Lyra's voice joined the conversation. "I'll go with them," she said firmly. "My hybrid physiology makes me the ideal candidate to activate the failsafe." Admiral Krell nodded solemnly. "Very well. Prepare for immediate departure. The fate of this system rests in your hands." Minutes later, Brian, Iris, and Lyra boarded a modified progenitor scout ship. The vessel hummed with a mix of human, Krenim, and Vex technology, a testament to their alliance. As they launched from the flagship, the full scale of the battle became apparent. Energy beams crisscrossed space, and explosions bloomed silently against the backdrop of stars. Brian's hands danced across the controls, guiding the ship through the chaos. His enhanced reflexes allowed him to anticipate and avoid incoming fire with uncanny precision. Iris coordinated with the fleet, ensuring their approach vector remained clear. "Unity Squadron Delta, this is Infiltrator 1, she called out, requesting cover fire at coordinates 227 Mark 035. Lyra focused intently, using her abilities to mask their energy signature. The scout ship slipped through the battlefield like a ghost, undetected by enemy sensors. As they neared the massive stellar manipulation device, a swarm of defense drones descended upon them. Brian executed a series of tight maneuvers, narrowly avoiding their attacks. Iris took control of the weapon systems, her targeting enhanced by her Krenim training. Bursts of energy lanced out from their ship, clearing a path through the drone formation. A stray shot rocked their vessel, alarms blaring as systems flickered. "Hull breach in aft section," Iris called out. Lyra immediately extended her energy field, containing the damage. "I've got it stabilized, but I don't know how long I can hold it," she said through gritted teeth. Brian pushed the engines to their limit, aiming for a docking port on the massive device. As they approached, he realized the automated systems were offline. "I'll have to do this manually," he muttered. Using his enhanced strength, Brian wrenched the control yoke, aligning their ship with the docking clamps. With a screech of metal on metal, they connected to the stellar manipulation device. The trio donned their specialized environmental suits, designed to withstand the intense conditions surrounding the device. As the airlock cycled, Iris checked her weapon one last time. "Remember," Brian said, his voice tight with tension, "we're likely to encounter internal defenses. Stay alert." They stepped into the device, immediately confronted by a labyrinth of pulsating energy conduits and complex machinery. Brian took point, his understanding of progenitor technology guiding them through the maze. Iris kept her senses attuned for any sign of security drones, leading them around potential patrol routes and identifying access points to bypass locked sectors. As they progressed deeper, the structure groaned and shuddered around them. Gravitational fluctuations made walking difficult, and surges of energy arced between conduits. Lyra strained to maintain a protective field around the team, her face beaded with sweat inside her helmet. "The star's becoming more unstable," she warned. "We don't have much time." Finally, they reached a massive set of doors, intricate patterns etched into their surface. Beyond lay the central control chamber, and their best hope for averting catastrophe. Brian placed his hand on the door's access panel, his enhanced physiology interfacing with the alien technology. Iris readied her weapon, prepared for whatever might be waiting for them inside. Lyra took a deep breath, steeling herself for the challenge ahead. As the doors began to slide open, revealing the pulsing heart of the stellar manipulation device, the trio exchanged a final look of tenacity. Whatever lay beyond, they would face it together. Their unique abilities and unbreakable bond, their greatest weapons against the cosmic peril that threatened everything they held dear. As the doors slid open, Brian, Iris, and Lyra stepped into the heart of the stellar manipulation device. The chamber pulsed with an otherworldly energy, its massive core dominating the center of the room. Intricate machinery surrounded them, humming with terrifying power. Brian's eyes darted across the complex array of controls, his enhanced mind already deciphering the alien interface. "There," he said, pointing to a central panel. "That's our primary access point." Iris nodded, taking up a defensive stance near the entrance. Her Krenim combat training kicked in as she scanned for potential threats. "I'll keep watch. Do what you need to do." Lyra moved toward the center of the chamber, where a sleek cylindrical structure stood apart from the rest. As she approached, a panel slid open, revealing a DNA scanner. She hesitated for a moment, then placed her hand on the glowing surface. The device hummed to life, reading Lyra's unique genetic code. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then the core's pulsations shifted, its rhythm changing to a steady, harmonious beat. Energy conduits throughout the chamber began to realign, their glow intensifying. Brian's fingers flew across the control panel, his enhanced knowledge allowing him to interpret the data streaming across the screens. "It's working," he called out. "The fail-safe's been activated. The device is now attempting to stabilize the star." A tremor ran through the chamber, causing Iris to brace herself against a nearby console. "I don't like the sound of that," she said, her enhanced senses picking up the growing vibrations. Brian's expression tightened as he studied the readouts. "The reversal process is putting too much strain on the systems. We're looking at a cascade failure if we don't act fast." Alarms blared, their shrill cry echoing through the chamber. Components began to spark and smoke, overloading under the immense energy load. Brian's mind raced, formulating a plan even as his hands continued to work the controls. Iris, I need you here, he called out. We need to manually reroute the power flow. Iris was at his side in an instant, her enhanced strength allowing her to easily pry open access panels that would have taken a normal human several minutes to remove. As Brian called out instructions, she physically rerouted massive power conduits, her movements perfectly synchronized with his commands. Lyra, still connected to the DNA scanner, extended her abilities to their limit. Blue energy crackled around her as she contained localized overloads, buying precious seconds for Brian and Iris to work. The floor beneath them began to break apart, revealing glimpses of the turbulent stellar energy below. Gravity fluctuated wildly, making every movement a challenge. Brian and Iris gripped the control panel tightly, their enhanced strength allowing them to resist the pull of the growing chasms. We need to trigger a controlled overload in the tertiary subsystem, Brian shouted over the din of alarms and groaning metal. It's our only chance to safely release the built-up energy. Iris nodded, understanding immediately. She moved to a nearby panel, her muscles straining as she tore away the protective covering. Ready when you are, she called back. Brian's fingers danced across the controls, preparing for the precise sequence of commands that would trigger the overload. Lyra, we need you to channel the excess energy away from the critical systems. Can you do it? Lyra gritted her teeth, her body glowing with awe-inspiring power. I'll give it everything I've got. As Brian initiated the sequence, a massive energy surge rocked the entire structure. Lyra cried out, her body arching as the DNA scanner pulsed with blinding light. Before their eyes, her form began to change, growing taller and more muscular. Her features sharpened, and the energy surrounding her intensified tenfold. In her new form, Lyra's abilities surged. She extended her hands, creating a stable energy field that enveloped the entire chamber. The gravitational fluctuations ceased, allowing Brian and Iris to focus entirely on their task. With a final push, Brian executed the last command. The chamber fell silent for a heart-stopping moment. Then the core's pulsations smoothed out into a steady, harmonious rhythm. The alarms faded and the tremors stilled. Brian sagged against the console, exhaling heavily. We did it. The star is stabilizing and the device is under control. Iris looked around the chamber, taking in the damage in the still-shifting structure. We may have won this battle, but we're not out of danger yet. How do we get out of here? As if in response to her question, the chamber's doors sealed shut, locking them inside. The trio gathered at the center of the room, surrounded by the humming machinery and pulsing energy conduits. Brian's brow furrowed as he felt a strange sensation coursing through his body. He looked down to see that he was still growing, his height increasing and his muscles expanding. Something's happening to me, he said, his voice a mix of wonder and concern. Iris and Lyra watched in amazement as Brian's transformation continued, mirroring Lyra's earlier change. The three now stood at equal height, their bodies radiating power and vitality. The progenitor technology, Lyra mused, flexing her new form. It's affecting us in ways we couldn't have predicted. Brian nodded, his mind racing with the implications. We need to find a way out and report back to the fleet. Who knows what other surprises this device might have in store for us? As they spoke, the chamber around them continued to shift and reconfigure. Walls moved, creating new passages and sealing off others. The core's steady pulse seemed to be driving the changes, as if the entire structure was adapting to its new stable state. Let's move, Iris said, taking point as they approached a newly formed corridor. We need to find an exit before the progenitors regroup. The trio set off into the unknown depths of the stellar manipulation device, their enhanced abilities allowing them to navigate the treacherous and ever-changing environment. As they moved deeper into the structure, they remained alert for any residual defenses or systems that might pose a threat. Brian's mind worked overtime, processing the alien technology around them and searching for a way to communicate with the Unity fleet. Iris's combat instincts were on high alert, guiding them through the safest routes. Lyra's newfound powers pulsed with each step, ready to defend against any unexpected dangers. As they pressed on, the true scale of their accomplishment began to sink in. They had not only prevented a stellar catastrophe, but had also gained control of a powerful progenitor weapon. The implications of this victory and their own startling transformations took a toll on their minds. The shifting corridors led them deeper into the heart of the device, each turn bringing new challenges and mysteries. Time seemed to lose meaning as they navigated the labyrinthine structure, their enhanced bodies allowing them to press on without fatigue. Ahead, a massive chamber beckoned, its purpose unknown. As they approached the threshold, Brian, Iris, and Lyra exchanged determined looks. Whatever lay beyond, they would face it together. Their unique abilities and unbreakable bond, their greatest assets in the face of the unknown. As they stepped into the massive chamber, the floor beneath them suddenly shifted, tilting at a precarious angle. Brian's enhanced reflexes kicked in as he reached out to steady Iris and Lyra. "Watch your step," he warned, his voice tight with concentration. The entire structure seems to be reconfiguring itself. No sooner had the words left his mouth than a section of the wall peeled away, revealing a maze of twisting corridors beyond. The trio exchanged quick glances before pressing forward, their enhanced bodies allowing them to navigate the treacherous terrain with surprising agility. As they traversed the shifting landscape, Brian found himself growing taller and stronger with each passing moment. He marveled at his newfound strength as he effortlessly lifted a fallen support beam, blocking their path. "This way," Iris called out, her Krenim combat training guiding them through the safest routes. She vaulted over a chasm that had opened up in the floor, her movements fluid and precise. Lyra followed close behind, her energy manipulation abilities proving invaluable as she created localized fields to stabilize unstable sections of the structure. The air crackled with power around her hybrid physiology adapting to the alien environment in ways they couldn't have predicted. As they pressed deeper into the heart of the device, the challenges mounted. Debris rained down from above, forcing Brian to use his enhanced strength to shield his companions. Iris's agility came into play as she maneuvered through a field of swinging pendulums, each capable of crushing them with a single blow. "There!" Lyra shouted, pointing to a narrow maintenance shaft that seemed to lead towards the outer hull. "That might be our way out." Without hesitation, they began their ascent. The shaft was tight and claustrophobic, forcing them to climb single file. Iris took the lead, her nimble fingers finding purchase on the smooth metal surface. Brian brought up the rear, his increased size and strength providing a stable anchor for the group. Halfway up, the shaft suddenly rotated, threatening to send them plummeting back down. Lyra reacted instinctively, generating a series of energy platforms that allowed them to reorient themselves and continue their climb. Just as they thought they were in the clear, a high-pitched whine filled the air. A panel slid open, revealing a cluster of security drones, their weapons primed and ready to fire. "Incoming!" Brian shouted, using a piece of debris as an impromptu shield to deflect the first volley of energy pulses. Iris sprang into action, her body a blur of motion as she disabled drone after drone with precise strikes. Lyra focused her abilities, creating an energy barrier around the group that shimmered and pulsed with each impact. The strain of maintaining the barrier took its toll on Lyra. Her grip on the shaft wall faltered, and for a heart-stopping moment, she began to fall. Brian, now nearly matching Iris in height, reached out with lightning speed, catching Lyra's hand and pulling her to safety. As their hands touched, an unexpected surge of energy passed between them. Brian felt a tingling sensation course through his body, and suddenly, he could sense the energy fields around them. Acting on instinct, he extended his hand, creating a pulse that disabled the remaining drones. "How did you do that?" Lyra asked, her eyes wide with amazement. Brian shook his head, equally stunned. "I'm not sure. It's like our abilities merge somehow." There was no time to dwell on this new development. The shaft trembled ominously, spurring them to continue their ascent with renewed urgency. As they neared the outer hull, they encountered a sealed airlock. The control panel sparked and fizzled, clearly damaged beyond repair. "We'll have to do this the hard way," Iris said, bracing herself against the inner doors. With a grunt of effort, she began to force them apart, her enhanced strength straining against the resistant metal. Brian joined her, adding his strength to hers. As the doors slowly parted, the vacuum of space threatened to suck them out. Brian focused, drawing on his newfound energy manipulation to contain the atmosphere within the chamber. Once inside the airlock, they faced their next challenge. The outer doors were locked down, a fail-safe triggered by the device's compromised integrity. Lyra stepped forward, placing her hand on the airlock's control interface. Her hybrid genetics allowed her to interface directly with the system, bypassing security protocols that would have stymied even the most skilled hacker. "I'm in," she announced, her voice strained with concentration. "But the structural integrity is critical. If we open these doors, the whole section might collapse." Brian and Iris exchanged a look, then moved to opposite sides of the airlock. Using their enhanced strength, they began to reinforce the structure, bracing it against the impending stress. "Do it," Brian commanded. With a hiss of escaping air, the outer doors began to part. The trio found themselves face to face with the vast expanse of space, littered with the debris of the recent battle. Their moment of triumph was short-lived. Alarms blared throughout the structure, and the device began to shake violently. "Our stabilization efforts must have been temporary," Brian realized, his mind racing to process their options. He spotted a damaged progenitor shuttle drifting nearby. "There! That's our best chance." As they prepared to make the perilous spacewalk, the stellar manipulation device groaned and shuddered around them. Time was running out. "On my mark," Brian said, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. 3, 2, 1, mark. They launched themselves from the airlock, using controlled bursts from their suit thrusters to navigate the treacherous debris field. The unstable gravity well created by the failing device threatened to pull them off course, but Lyra's energy tether kept them connected and coordinated. As they neared the shuttle, a massive piece of debris loomed in their path. Brian, drawing on his newly acquired energy manipulation skills, created a deflection field that narrowly diverted the oncoming wreckage. They reached the progenitor shuttle, only to find its airlock sealed and unresponsive. Iris immediately set to work, her powerful arms straining as she manually pried open the outer doors. Inside, Brian's enhanced understanding of progenitor technology allowed him to quickly assess the shuttle systems. "It's damaged, but I think I can get it operational," he announced, his fingers flying over the alien controls. Lyra secured the airlock behind them as Brian and Iris worked frantically to bring the propulsion system online. The stellar manipulation device was breaking apart, releasing powerful energy waves that threatened to destroy their only means of escape. With seconds to spare, the shuttle's engines roared to life. Brian took the helm, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to pilot the craft through the expanding field of debris with uncanny precision. As they distanced themselves from the imminent explosion, Iris attempted to contact the Unity fleet. "This is Lieutenant Iris Vega to any Unity vessels. We've neutralized the progenitor device and require immediate extraction. Please respond." Static filled the communication channel as Brian continued to navigate through the chaos. Behind them, the stellar manipulation device began its final, catastrophic collapse. The shuttle shuddered as the shock wave hit them, pushing the craft's systems to their limits. Brian's hands danced over the controls, fighting to maintain their trajectory as they raced away from the destruction. As the debris field began to thin, a sense of cautious relief settled over the trio. They had survived against impossible odds, but their mission was just the beginning. The Unity fleet was still out there, and they had a wealth of new information and abilities to report. Brian glanced at his companions, taking in their transformed appearances and the lingering glow of energy that surrounded them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, their bond stronger than ever. The damaged progenitor shuttle pressed on through the vastness of space, carrying its 3 extraordinary passengers towards an uncertain future. The destruction of the stellar manipulation device faded behind them, a testament to their success and a harbinger of the changes to come. The destruction of the stellar manipulation device faded behind them, a testament to their success and a harbinger of the changes to come. As Brian expertly maneuvered the damaged progenitor shuttle through the debris field, Iris focused on establishing communication with the Unity fleet. Her fingers danced across the alien control panel, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to quickly adapt to the unfamiliar interface. This is Lieutenant Iris Vega to Unity Fleet. Come in, Unity Fleet, she repeated, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. After several tense moments, a crackle of static filled the cabin, followed by a familiar voice. Lieutenant Vega, this is Admiral Krell. Thank the stars you're alive. What's your status? Relief washed over the trio as Iris quickly relayed their situation. Admiral, we've neutralized the progenitor device, but our shuttle is severely damaged. We need immediate extraction. Understood, Lieutenant. We're sending coordinates for a rendezvous point. A rescue vessel is en route, Admiral Krell responded, his voice tinged with both relief and urgency. As Brian adjusted their course to meet the rescue ship, the shuttle's systems began to falter. Warning lights flashed across the control panel, and a low, ominous groan reverberated through the hull. We're losing power, Brian announced, his brow furrowed in concentration. The propulsion system is failing. Iris sprang into action, her towering frame easily reaching the overhead panels. With her enhanced strength, she pried open a section of the ceiling, exposing a tangle of alien circuitry. I'll try to reroute power manually, she called out, her hands moving with practiced precision despite the unfamiliar technology. Lyra, meanwhile, closed her eyes and focused her energy manipulation abilities on the life support systems. A soft glow emanated from her hands as she created a delicate balance of breathable air within the craft. I can keep us alive, she said, her voice strained with effort, but I don't know for how long. As they neared the rendezvous point, the shuttle gave a violent shudder. The propulsion system sputtered and died, leaving them drifting aimlessly in space. Brian, now standing at an impressive 8 feet tall due to his continued transformation, turned to his companions. I have an idea, he said, his voice tinged with purpose. It's risky, but it might be our only chance. He quickly outlined his plan to use Lyra's energy manipulation in conjunction with his newfound abilities to create a makeshift propulsion field around the shuttle. Iris nodded, her tactical mind already assessing the potential risks and rewards. I'll man the airlock, she said, her 9-foot frame easily maneuvering in the confined space. I can guide our trajectory manually if needed. With a shared look of understanding, they set their plan into motion. Brian and Lyra positioned themselves at opposite ends of the shuttle, their hands outstretched. As they concentrated, a pulsating field of energy began to form around the craft. Now, Brian shouted. In perfect synchronization, they poured their combined power into the field. The shuttle lurched forward, propelled by the sheer force of their will and the hybrid technology coursing through their veins. Iris braced herself in the open airlock, her enhanced vision scanning the space ahead for any potential obstacles. As they approached the rescue vessel, she called out directions, guiding Brian and Lyra's efforts with precision. The rescue ship loomed before them, its bay doors open in anticipation of their arrival. With a final surge of energy, Brian and Lyra pushed the shuttle forward. Iris, anchoring herself with one hand, reached out with the other to guide their approach. Brace for impact, she yelled as they entered the bay. In a daring maneuver, the three leapt from their failing shuttle to the rescue ship's deck. Their enhanced reflexes allowed them to absorb the impact, rolling to disperse the force of their landing. As the bay doors closed behind them, sealing them safely inside, the full weight of their ordeal finally hit. Brian, Iris, and Lyra collapsed into each other's arms, their bodies shaking with a mixture of exhaustion and relief. The rescue ship's crew rushed to their aid, their eyes wide with amazement at the sight of the transformed trio. Brian, now nearly matching Iris in height, stood on unsteady legs as medical personnel swarmed around them. As the ship set course for the Unity flagship, Brian caught Iris's gaze. Despite their exhaustion, a spark of something deeper passed between them. Their shared ordeal had forged a bond that transcended their original differences, hinting at possibilities neither had dared to imagine before. The rescue ship's engines hummed as it carried them back to the waiting Unity fleet, where new challenges and discoveries awaited. For now, though, Brian, Iris, and Lyra allowed themselves a moment of respite, secure in the knowledge that they had faced the impossible and emerged victorious.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.